Looking at the 8 treasure chests, Li Rong's eyes burned with a certain heat. If only all 8 of these chests were hers, how wonderful that would be. But she also knew that this was just wishful thinking. How could they possibly all be hers? For transmigrators, treasure chests represented opportunities for development. Opening a single valuable item could significantly boost the overall strength of their territory. Although she had brought many people for this operation, the ones who had contributed the most in battle were Fang Hao's subordinates. Her own subordinates, whom she had initially thought were strong and well-equipped, ended up doing the work of auxiliary troops. Stripping equipment, burying corpses, carrying things. Her side seemed more like a moving company, and they were certainly efficient at it. It was clear now that Fang Hao would take the lion's share. She hoped that, considering she provided the map and did the labor, he wouldn't be too excessive. Thinking of this, she pulled her collar down once more, revealing a larger expanse of snowy white skin and an enticing cleavage. Fang Hao didn't have nearly as many internal thoughts as Li Rong. Silver treasure chests were of too low a level. Even if items were opened, they would only be of around blue quality. For his territory at this stage, they weren't of much use. In his view, the most valuable thing in the underground palace wasn't these 8 silver treasure chests, but the final level, the Golden Queen's room. There should be another chest inside, and it would definitely be of a higher grade than silver. Fang Hao glanced at them casually and said, "According to our agreement, shall we go half and half? 4 for you and 4 for me." Really? Li Rong's expression brightened with joy. She felt a bit embarrassed for being so excited and tried to control herself, but holding it in was difficult. "It's what we agreed on. Why would I lie?" Fang Hao replied casually. "Ahem. Fang Hao, you contributed the most to this exploration. You could take a few more." If Li Rong had held the advantage during the battle, she wouldn't have hesitated to demand a larger share of the harvest. "No need. Let's just split them as we agreed." Fang Hao walked directly to the chests. He opened 4 of them immediately. Obtained. White steel scale armor blueprint, blue. White steel scale finger guards blueprint, blue. Carved stone bed blueprint, green. 102 warfire coins, for shadow stones. Obtained. Silver inlaid round shield blueprint, blue. Pure white frying pan blueprint, green. 125 warfire coins, 3 shadow stones. Obtained. White steel helmet blueprint, blue. For undead golden statues, 105 warfire coins, 6 shadow stones. Obtained. Ghost stone table blueprint, blue. Mithril helmet blueprint, blue. 98 warfire coins, 3 shadow stones. All 4 chests were opened in succession. As expected, most were blue blueprints, and the blueprints for the white steel scale armor and white steel helmet had already been recorded before. They were redundant blueprints. As for the other blueprints, while they weren't of much use to him, they could expand his collection of blueprints. How about it? Get anything good? Fang Hao looked at Li Rong. At this moment, Li Rong's face was beaming with joy, as if she had picked up a massive fortune. This made Fang Hao suspect that he had chosen the wrong chests, and that Li Rong had opened something amazing. "I opened so many blueprints, and they're all blue," Li Rong said excitedly. "Phew." Fang Hao let out a breath. "Just blue blueprints. I thought you'd opened something incredible." Fang Hao didn't intend to ask her exactly what she got, and said directly, "You can sell the shadow stones to me. You won't have any use for them anyway." "Sure, I'll just give them to you." Li Rong very generously pushed the dozen or so shadow stones toward Fang Hao. She had no use for items from the Undead faction. "Do you have the blueprints for the white steel scale armor and white steel helmet?" "I have 2 extra copies I can give you," Fang Hao asked. "Really? I don't have those." Fang Hao generously gave her the 2 extra blueprints. She took them joyfully and recorded them directly into her lord's book. After recording them, Li Rong looked at Fang Hao warily. "You're just giving me these blue blueprints? You don't regret what happened last night and are trying to grind favorability with me now, are you?" "Forget it. Do I even need to grind your favorability? It's already overflowing." Li Rong's face turned red. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Fang Hao didn't mind and continued, "I'll have places where I'll need your help later, so consider this an early thank you." Li Rong patted her chest and said loyally, "Just tell me when the time comes. I'll handle whatever it is for you." Thanks in advance." Next, The two of them split the gold and silver utensils they had found in the underground palace 50-50. The collected shadow stones and traces of death were all allocated to Fang Hao. Li Rong received a larger share of the utensils. After dividing the loot, both were very happy. Fang Hao obtained a certain amount of shadow stones and traces of death, while Li Rong not only opened many blueprints, but also gained a large amount of gold and silver. With this gold and silver, she would have the capital to manage her shop's cash flow, which solved many of her problems. While they were in high spirits, Li Rong took Fang Hao on a tour of her territory. The layout of her territory was very simple. The barracks and functional buildings were in one area. The rest of the space was entirely filled with factories. A vast stretch of factory sheds was filled with workers producing the cosmetics sold by Xianming Tower. These were used to maintain her supply of cosmetic products. During their conversation, he learned that in addition to her own peasants in the factories, Li Rong had also recruited a large number of residents from nearby villages. However, supply was still quite tight. If she wanted to open branch stores in other cities, the current scale of the factories would be completely unable to sustain it. Either the prices would have to rise to a point where ordinary people couldn't afford them, catering only to nobles, or she would have to expand the scale of her factories, building more and recruiting more hands. But with Li Rong's current capabilities, she couldn't do those things yet. Even opening a second shop in the city was fraught with difficulties. She had spent a lot of money on bribes and negotiations were still ongoing. The clothing you sell on the channel is also quite good. Have you ever thought about a partnership? Li Rong said, standing in front of a factory entrance while puffing on a cigarette. What kind of partnership? Put your clothing in Xianming Tower to sell, and we'll split the profits. Xianming Tower's primary industry was cosmetics, and clothing didn't sell very well there. However, many people came to buy cosmetics, which drove traffic to the items on the second and third floors, generating some profit. It just wasn't that significant. So, Li Rong was also considering how to increase the sales volume of clothing and accessories. I'll have to think about that. I'm also planning to open my own shops in the city. Giving them to you might affect my own shops, Fang Hao replied softly. You're going to open a shop in Silverwing City? Shops aren't easy to open. With all the red tape, you won't get it done in a year or even 6 months. Li Rong first expressed surprise, then analyzed. Not necessarily. I'll have Rebecca mention it to Olivia. Opening a shop shouldn't be a big problem. Fang Hao's tone remained calm. Li Rong wanted to retort, but the words got stuck in her throat. If Olivia helped, then opening a single shop really wouldn't be difficult. You're something else, Li Rong said through gritted teeth, somewhat envious. I'll think about it when I get back. I have shops in Lysis City and Pearl City. You can put your cosmetics in my shops to sell when the time comes. Both of them were eyeing each other's goods. Phew. Li Rong crossed her arms and exhaled another cloud of smoke. We'll see. I'll consider it once my second shop in Silverwing City is up and running and my product supply can keep up. All right. The two returned to the Lord's Manor. In the afternoon, they returned directly to Silverwing City. Meanwhile, on the other side, at the border of the barren battlefield, after several days of travel, Dong Jieyue had led an undead army of 2 million into the region of the dwarf Bafing Mountain. The undead possessed advantages that living beings did not. They traveled day and night without knowing the slightest bit of fatigue. With such a massive number, the food and supplies they carried were only what was needed for the few living beings accompanying them. The army of white bones, stretching beyond the horizon, stood in neat formation. In the middle of the army, a large tent made of stitched animal hides had been erected. In the center of the tent was a log table displaying a map of all the cities and routes in Bafing Mountain. The map had been provided by Belerga. It recorded the hills, forests, and roads within the Bafing Mountain region in great detail, without a single error. In front of the map, Dong Jieyue sat in the center, flanked by dragon skeleton hero Spencer, troll skeleton hero Rochuan, orc skeleton hero Blacksword, human skeleton hero Heavy Arrow, and dwarf hero Belerga. Behind these heroes sat a second row of people. They were 13 transmigrators, 12 were city lords under Dong Jieyue, and the other was Deng Bin, along with Deng Bin's hero, Zhak Li. Fang Hao wanted to end this war before winter arrived. Therefore, he had also deployed many heroes from nearby to assist Dong Jiehua in the battle. Among them, Spencer and Rochuan were orange heroes, Belerga was a purple hero, and Black Sword and Heavy Arrow were blue heroes. When these transmigrators saw such a luxurious lineup of heroes, they were completely stunned. Since when were heroes as common as cabbages, appearing one after another? Their original anxiety about the war turned into excitement and anticipation. Dong Jiehua looked around and spoke softly. Commander Belerga, please introduce the situation of Boffing Mountain to the newly arrived commanders. Spencer and Rochuan had both come later as reinforcements. They were unaware of the previous developments. Belerga took a thin wooden stick, drew several areas on the map, and spoke. These are the 12 border fortresses of Boffing Mountain, arranged in descending order of 5, 4, and 3. The final city built against the mountain is the main city of Boffing Mountain, Gray Iron City. Next, what they had to do was attack the first 5 of the 12 fortresses. Belerga paused slightly and continued. These 12 fortresses watch over each other. If one is attacked, the surrounding fortresses will immediately provide support. Breaking through will still be somewhat difficult. If it were any other race, Belerga would certainly say that a quick breakthrough was impossible. But at the thought of the neat rows of the undead army stretching endlessly outside the tent, he fell silent. It seemed that against such an army that did not fear death, any defense was futile. After finishing his introduction, Belerga set the stick aside. Seeing that he had stopped speaking, Dong Jiehua continued. Dwarves are skilled with machinery, but their numbers are few. Even with reinforcements, the garrisons of the first 5 fortresses will not exceed 50,000 men, perhaps even fewer. So, everyone, speak up. How should we fight this, and how should we formulate our tactics? The scene fell into a brief silence. Everyone looked at the map, thinking silently. The physically imposing Rochuan was the first to speak. Our advantage is massive. There's no need to overthink it. Just charge in, occupy the 5 border fortresses tonight, and then use those 5 as a base to continue the offensive inward. The advantages and disadvantages of both sides were simply too obvious. With the addition of 2 more orange heroes, there was basically no suspense in this battle. Beside him, Spencer also nodded and added further. We have a lot of people. Attacking a single city with everyone wouldn't utilize our numerical advantage, and we also need to guard against reinforcements from other fortresses. He pointed to the map and said in a deep voice, I suggest splitting our forces to pin down the other fortresses while the main force attacks this central one. Once it's taken, we can flank the other pinned-down fortresses overnight to take the outermost 5 as quickly as possible. Everyone looked at the map, analyzing Spencer's plan. At the same time, they were mentally calculating the feasibility of this plan. Crushing the enemy with sheer numbers was the tactic the undead were best at. Even the machinery the dwarves were so proud of would likely find it hard to turn the tide against so many people. Before long, Black Sword also agreed. This plan is feasible. Our intelligence on the dwarves is sufficient. We can just attack directly. It's a good plan. Dong Jiehua stood up, scanned the room, and asked, Does anyone else have any other opinions? Splitting forces to pin down the enemy while the main force attacks. No objections. It works. Agreed. Seeing that everyone agreed, Dong Jiehua continued. Good. Tonight, Commander Spencer will accompany me in leading the main force's attack. The other commanders will lead troops to pin down the other fortresses respectively, and the remaining transmigrators will assist the commanders. Yes. Everyone responded in unison. The transmigrators' main job was to act as communicators. They used their Lord's book to send messages to each other. Secondly, they could craft some items to make things more convenient. Dong Jiehua nodded. Good. There are about 6 to 8 hours left. Everyone, go back and prepare. Yes. Everyone answered and filed out of the tent. Night fell. In the hall of the Dwarf Border Fortress Commander, the 3rd Battalion Commander, Hather, was sitting in his chair with trepidation, a communicating conch shell placed before him. He just stared at it silently. Commander Hather, what did His Majesty say? When will the reinforcements arrive? An elderly dwarf asked. Yes, when will the reinforcements get here? This border fortress was not just a stronghold, but also a city. The several people present were all from the more powerful families in the city. The dwarf scouts had already brought back news of the undead approaching. This had frightened many of them out of their wits. Hather's expression was equally grim. Just over a week ago, he had only just been promoted to commander. He hadn't expected the first battle he participated in to be of such high difficulty. In his heart, he began to feel a bit envious of the commander who had been dismissed for making a mistake. At least that man stayed in Grey Iron City and could save his life. He himself seemingly held military power now, yet he had been stationed at the very front line. But at this moment, he had to stabilize the people in the city. Don't worry, we still have time, and since the fortresses support each other, they won't be so easy to break through, Hather consoled them softly. But he was also waiting for news from Grey Iron City. The message had clearly been sent out days ago, yet there was still no reply from Grey Iron City. Just as the nobles in the city were breathing a slight sigh of relief, they suddenly felt that something was wrong. The group simultaneously looked down at the water cups on the table. They saw a rhythmic ripple in the cups, and then the chandeliers began to sway. Finally, even the ground began to tremble with each passing second. What's happening? An earthquake. Quick, get out. It's an earthquake. The hall instantly fell into chaos. At the same time, a deafening bell rang out from outside the city. Hather's face changed instantly. Before he could go to verify, guards came running in. Commander, the undead have begun their siege. At the guard's words, Hather's face turned even grimmer. The other dwarves in the hall paled a few shades. The earlier panic was gone. They simply stood rooted, dumbstruck. By now they all knew what the rhythmic tremors beneath their feet meant. The undead had begun their assault. Boom, boom, boom. The steady quakes grew clearer, and the bronze bell outside clanged ever faster. Hather wasted no more time. Snatching up a short-handled battle axe, he strode outside. He reached the foot of the city wall in quick steps. When he mounted the wall, the whole structure seemed to sway gently. From the parapet, he looked down. The attacking undead carried no torches. In the thick night, only shifting shadows could be glimpsed. Hather swallowed hard. He took out the communicating conch shell, still no word from it. What was Grey Iron City doing? Why hadn't they reached a decision yet? Was sending reinforcements truly this difficult? But he had to push those thoughts aside for now. Glancing along the wall, he saw soldiers riddled with fear and unease. Hather knew that in their current state these men could barely hold the city. Once battle began, deserters might appear at any moment. His gaze swept the line and he shouted, King Rune's relief force is on the way. We only need to hold 2 days, just 2, and then we counterattack. Long live King Rune. Reinforcements? Every soldier brightened. 2 days was nothing, then they'd be safe. Morale soared. All raised their arms and roared, Long live King Rune. Boom, 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 boom. Just as the dwarven spirits rose and fear of the undead ebbed, a low battle drum sounded from below. At first the beats were ragged, then they merged into a single, steady rhythm. As the drums pounded, ash-gray rings of light spread outward, shattering into smaller halos beneath the undead soldiers' feet. One after another, the halos flared under the undead. The night remained dark, but the pale rings were strikingly bright. To the dwarves it looked like countless halos stretching to the horizon. Hather was stunned. Every dwarven soldier was stunned. Their numbers were insane. Dig up every corpse from Boffing Mountains past 10 years, and you still wouldn't match the horde outside. How could they possibly fight this? Commander! Commander! They're charging, a dwarf yelled. Hather snapped awake and stared ahead. The undead had raised their weapons and were surging forward. It was a chaotic rush, no tactics, just a swarm surging toward the walls. No siege ladders, no battering rams. Open fire. Musketeers ready. Hather bellowed. Boom, boom, boom. Cannons roared, hurling iron into the undead ranks. Where the shells landed, undead were flung sky high. Smoke filled the air, the earth shook with fire. After several volleys, craters pocked the ground. Then Hather noticed something else. In the distance, skeleton oxen dragged flatbed carts draped in tarp. The cargo was unloaded, the tarp thrown back, revealing thick gun barrels. Hather's heart lurched. The undead had artillery too. How could they possibly have cannons? Then a group of humans ran from the rear, loading shot into the guns, touching off the fuses with torches, moving with practiced ease. "Damn it, take cover," Hather shouted. Boom, boom, boom. Undead cannons spat flame. Heavy shots slamming into the wall, stone blasting apart. Dwarves hurled aside, cracks webbing across the masonry. Hather hauled himself up. They were no undead. They felt fear, yet he shook off the dizziness and roared. Blast their guns to scrap. Barrels swiveled toward the enemy. Boom, boom. The two sides traded shells, explosions ripping through each line. The ground quaked without pause, the air reeking of powder and scorched flesh. By now the undead had reached the foot of the wall. Dwarven musketeers opened fire. Aim was unnecessary. Work the bolt, fire a shot downward, and you hit a skeleton. But bullets proved weak against bone. Unless a skull was struck, body shots barely mattered. Bang, bang, bang. Guns spat tongues of fire, bullets raining down. On the undead side, skeleton archers reached their firing spots, and under orders began loosing arrows at the dwarven marksmen, pinning them down. Bullets streaked back and forth. The night was no longer dark. Cannon flashes and gunfire lit the field like day. Skeleton warriors swarmed the base, trampling their own to scale the wall. Undead zone. Dong Jiayue sat in the central command tent, Lord's book in hand, scanning messages from her officers. As expected, the 4 nearby dwarven strongholds had dispatched relief forces. En route they'd walked straight into her ambush and been wiped out. 4 armies now camped before their target fortresses, ready to assault. It was time to take this city. Dong Jiayue turned to Spencer beside her. "Commander Spencer, please take the bone dragons and secure the city." Spencer nodded. "As you wish." The instant the word left his lips, he leapt skyward, transforming midair into a vast dragon and streaking toward the walls. Behind him, several bone dragons followed. By now the sky had lost its moon, smoke and dust veiling the heavens like fog. Spencer peered through the clouds at the battle below. The dwarves still held, their cannons now swiveled downward, pounding the dense clusters of skeleton soldiers scaling the wall. Boom, boom. Under the barrage, the undead advance slowed for a moment. Soon, Spencer hovered above the city. SSSHHH. Orange-yellow bullets whistled past his scales. The dwarves had spotted the intruders. Bang, bang. Arm-thick ballista bolts shot toward the sky dragons. Spencer dared not relax. Those bolts were made to bring down flyers. Troll-built dragon-locking ballistae were a threat even to bone dragons, let alone these improved dwarven engines. Dodging the shafts, Spencer folded his wings and dove. Roar. A torrent of dragon fire poured across the wall. Crimson flames swept the parapet. Dwarves became charcoal in an instant. Cannon barrels melted into orange rivulets of iron. In a single pass, half the wall was scoured clean. The bone dragons behind him arrived, strafed the battlements, then circled overhead, loosing black beams at any dwarves trying to retake the wall. In moments, the undead flooded onto the ramparts like a tide. After brief scuffles with the remaining dwarves, they threw open the gates. Skeletons poured into the streets, clashing with the city's defenders. Flames sprang up, and the night rang with shouts and screams in every quarter. Clop, clop. The gates stood wide. Dong Jiayue strode in at the head of her troops. Spencer landed beside her, acting as her bodyguard. "Spread the word. Lay down arms and live," she called, silver spear raised. "Yes, ma'am." The human soldiers scattered at once, crying through the streets, "Lay down arms and live." Many dwarven troops, perhaps distrustful, kept fighting stubbornly. But this place was also home to a large population of dwarven civilians, folk who were no soldiers at all. When they heard that shout, there was no other choice. The enemy had breached the walls. To keep resisting was certain death. If there was even a sliver of hope to live, they had no wish to die. Half believing, half doubting, they cast aside their weapons and, of their own accord, knelt down. The savage, terrifying undead instantly halted in their tracks, veering around these people to seek new targets. Soon the sounds of slaughter inside the city grew fainter. Little by little, everything fell quiet. Only the occasional groan proved a great battle had just taken place. My lady, the prisoners have been locked in the jail. We also found the arsenal. Over 20 cannons of various types and 200 crates of shells, a soldier reported. Good. Take me to the warehouse, Dong Jieyue said. Following the soldier, she arrived at the warehouse. Dong Jieyue at once opened her lord's book and, through the trade channel, shipped every cannon and shell here to the other transmigrators besieging the 4 border strongholds. With these cannons, their firepower would no longer be outmatched by the dwarves. Once the cannons were dispatched, Dong Jieyue glanced at the map again and said, Deng Bin, take 50,000 men and seal this road. No dwarven reinforcements are to get through before noon tomorrow. The spot she pointed to lay between the 5 outlying stockades and the 4 rear cities. The road there was narrow, easy to defend, hard to assault. Her intention was to intercept the dwarven reinforcements coming from the rear. Understood. Deng Bin nodded at once. Dong Jieyue turned next to Spencer. Yang Xiaolan will stay and garrison here. Everyone else marches with me to outflank and attack the remaining 4 cities. Yes, ma'am. Corpses carpeted the streets of the captured city. Blood ran in rivers. They gave the battlefield not even a sweep before pressing the assault on the other cities. The army regrouped and advanced toward the next objective. On the march, Dong Jieyue kept glancing at Spencer. The advantage this flying unit had shown in the siege amazed her. Later, she would have Spencer and the Bone Dragon strike even more often, to accelerate the pace of the offensive. At the very same moment, Boffing Mountain, Gray Iron City. When Hather's spectral form appeared upon the hero altar, the gathered dwarf nobles below burst into disorder. Hather's death proved the dwarven border fortress had fallen. Boffing Mountain now faced an unprecedented threat. Resurrect him, Rune said, staff in hand, his face betraying no emotion. Sacrificial materials of every sort were arrayed upon the hero altar. A flash of light flickered. Slowly, a naked dwarf took shape upon the platform of the hero altar. When the dwarf opened his eyes again, brief bewilderment showed. Then he understood. He had died in battle and just been revived. Below, a dwarf presented him with clothes. Hather donned them and dropped to one knee. Your Majesty, the fortress has fallen. Rune regarded him and asked in a heavy voice, Tell me about the enemy. Yes, Your Majesty. Hather collected his thoughts and began. When night fell, the undead stormed the walls, vast numbers of them, charging straight through the cannon fire. They even had undead dragons that shot red and black beams from the sky. Gasp! At that, the hall erupted into even greater chaos. The assault had begun at night, and now the city was already lost. In other words, Hather's forces had held out for only a few short hours. Even as he spoke, they could scarcely believe such speed possible. Hather, I think you're just shirking blame. Where could so many undead come from? Did they kill every human and orc to make up those numbers? A dwarf stepped forward and shouted. His words rang true. Undead do not appear from thin air, they must be created. Even the transmigrators' recruitment function consumes resources for every soldier summoned. How could anyone field so many? Hather merely glanced at him and offered no reply, turning back to Rune. Your Majesty, every word I speak is true. I believe the undead pose a threat to Gray Iron City. We must prepare at once, he said gravely. Days earlier, scouts had already detected the undead's movements, and he had reported the news to Rune through the communicating conch shell, requesting reinforcements. Yet apparently Rune had treated the matter lightly. No reinforcements came, no reply was sent. Now the undead had walked in almost effortlessly, and the defense would only grow harder from here. Rune gave no immediate answer, merely studying Hather in silence, as if weighing the truth of his words. Hather had died, but how could so many undead exist outside Boffing Mountain? Still, the matter was far from over. Soon a courier hurried in and announced loudly, Your Majesty, word from the border forts. All 4 have fallen. A deathly hush gripped the hall. 5 cities taken in a single day. The dwarves' proud fortresses had proved as fragile as paper, their vaunted engines useless. Now every dwarf present believed Hather's report. Rune remained silent, expressionless. At length he spoke. Prepare the defenses. Contact Silverwing City. The dwarves now need allies. Early the next morning, Fang Hao finished breakfast and received a message from Dong Jiayue. 5 border strongholds had fallen in one night. A victory, yet not unexpected. Back when his domain's strength had been far less than now, they had waged a similar war against the Bloody Mountains. And the Undead army had flattened the entire range. All the more so against the current Boffing Mountain. After praising Dong Jiayue and her forces, he produced large quantities of ammunition and equipment for her, to ensure the coming battles could be fought at greater speed. Once he finished speaking with Dong Jiayue, Fang Hao took in Jia and visited other pedestrian streets, browsing the shops. At the same time, he observed the commercial district, making ready to open a store here later. They had not walked far before in Jia and Loli's hands were already full of snacks. They walked, ate, and pointed at shops and passers-by, like 2 country kids seeing the city for the first time. While the group was strolling, several people in church vestments approached from the opposite direction, stood directly in front of them, and blocked their way. At first, Fang Hao's party stepped aside, but the strangers moved again to bar their path. Only then did they sense something amiss. Fang Hao looked up, frowning at the figures before them. Temple Knight, Tier 7. Temple Attendant, Tier 5. The leader was a Tier 7 knight, the rest Tier 5 attendants. People from the church? Though the class names were unfamiliar, the insignia on their robes made it clear. They belonged to the church. The church was not composed solely of priests. It also maintained Templar armies. Else it could never wield such influence among humans. Looking for a fight? And Jia's expression darkened the instant her way was blocked. Want a brawl? We're not afraid of you. Loli thrust out a tiny finger at the leading temple knight, shouting loudly, though at her height it was hardly intimidating. Fang Hao's face turned grave as well, partly because of his own faction, partly because rumors claimed the church's people could be extreme. Even, in Fang Hao's view, using the God of Light's name to commit outright banditry. Surrounded by Lionheart Knights, Fang Hao asked, "Is there something you want, gentlemen?" The temple knight's expression was solemn and stern. "Who are you people? Who are you?" The temple knight asked sternly. His expression was solemn, but his tone carried a sense of interrogation and questioning. Being stopped by someone while shopping. This condescending attitude also ignited some anger in Fang Hao's heart. He said coldly, "What does that have to do with you?" "We suspect you are involved with the undead. Come with us to the temple for an investigation," the temple knight said calmly. And as he said that, the other attendants behind him prepared to step forward and apprehend them. Swish, swish, swish. The Lionheart Knights all drew the long swords from their waists, looking warily at the approaching figures. Seeing that the other party had revealed their weapons, the killing intent in their eyes was not feigned at all. The temple attendants also paused in their steps, not daring to advance. "What? Are you going to resist?" The temple knight's voice turned colder again. Fang Hao sneered. "I also suspect you are a vampire. Come with us." Actually, when he heard the other party mention the undead, he was truly startled. But after thinking about it carefully, he realized it was just a random excuse the other party had come up with. If they really knew some information about Fang Hao, it would probably be a priest coming to arrest him. It was just that these people had guessed quite accurately. He truly did have a connection with the undead. Are you trying to be enemies with the church? Enemies with the human race? The temple knight's voice rose a few octaves again. A faint light appeared on his body. The people who had blocked the road to watch the excitement suddenly seemed to be infected. They bowed in worship, murmuring praises for the glory of God. Fang Hao glanced at the changes in the surrounding crowd, his tone unwavering. If he had gone with them, he would have been in real danger. "Get lost, don't look for trouble here." Hearing the curse, the solemn-faced knight's face also showed an expression of annoyance, and he roared, "How dare you? Take these people down for me." Fang Hao also shouted, "Take them down. Kill those who resist on the spot." Both sides issued commands one after another. At the same time, they took up their weapons and charged at each other. Just as the two sides were about to clash, and the situation was further deteriorating, a loud roar came from a distance. "Stop! Immediately after, there was the sound of dense and rapid footsteps. Teams of fully armed patrol guards surrounded both groups of people. Catch the thief! Catch the thief! At the same time, a sharp and familiar voice sounded, only to see a burly captain with a green parrot standing on his shoulder walk over. He stood in the middle, blocking the two sides who were at loggerheads. His voice was cold, street brawling with weapons. You have a lot of guts. So it was him. Fang Hao and the others still had a deep impression of this green parrot. Recognizing the parrot, they knew that this was the patrol team they had met on the commercial street before. Captain Bakar, these people publicly insulted the church. Please take these people down, and I will take them back to the church for disposal. The temple knight said first when he saw the patrol team arrive. Seeing that the other party had filed a complaint first, and Jia and Luo Li immediately retorted. They were the ones who started it, and Jia said, pointing at the other party. Luo Li also chimed in. We were just shopping, and they stopped us and insisted on taking us away. Their words also smelled bad. The captain called Bakar turned to look at the temple knight, his voice serious. What's going on? Captain Bakar, we suspect these people are involved with the undead, and we're planning to take them back for investigation. However, they not only refused to cooperate, but also verbally insulted the church and resisted with weapons, the temple knight replied. The church was powerful, but Silverwing City was still ruled by the Hall of Justice. As a mere knight, he had no privileges before the patrol team. Hearing the other party's words, Bakar's brows furrowed instantly. He also remembered Fang Hao and these few people. After all, the appearance of the female beastman in the city also left a deep impression on him. Those who came from Lysa City to attend the council were not ordinary people in the first place. To say they were involved with the undead and then try to take them away was truly ridiculous. Bakar looked at the few people from the church with some disgust in his eyes. His tone was serious. Let's just drop this matter. Don't cause trouble here. After saying that, he was about to dismiss the people here. Hearing this, the temple knight's expression changed instantly. Although the church did not govern Silverwing City, it still held a strong position. To think he could just take over with such a sentence was impossible. He said coldly, Bakar, these people have insulted the church and insulted the God of Light. You cannot let them leave. As he spoke, the light on his body rose again. The surrounding citizens were once again affected by the light, their faces filled with indignation, and they shouted loudly, You cannot let them go. It seems. Fang Hao saw the changes in the surrounding crowd. This temple knight should possess a skill that can influence the emotions of believers. The reason why he said believers and not everyone was because only a few were shouting along, while many others were still watching the situation unfold with a sense of excitement. Bakar's face also darkened. He said, You say they are involved with the undead. Do you have any evidence? There is naturally evidence, but it is not on us. It will be clear after investigating at the church. The temple knight remained unyielding. This resolute tone even made Fang Hao a little uncertain. Did they really discover him? If he was truly exposed, he would have to kill his way out and flee. How many days do you plan to interrogate them? Bakar asked again. 7 days. Or if the evidence is conclusive, they will remain in the dungeon forever, the temple knight replied. Bakar sneered. The federal council is in 7 days. If he can't attend, how do you plan to explain it to His Eminence the Bishop? Hearing this, the temple knight was taken aback. Bakar continued. If you arrest him today, it might not be him who ends up in the dungeon. You need to think carefully. You mean he's a counselor? The temple knight re-examined Fang Hao. I've said what needs to be said. If you have evidence that he's involved with the undead, taking him away will be a great achievement. But if you don't, the church won't spare you, the Alliance of Justice won't spare you, and all the counselors attending the meeting won't spare you. Think carefully. Bakar's voice became even deeper. Sweat began to bead on the temple knight's forehead, and the temple attendants behind him also looked at Fang Hao and the others in surprise. Clearly, they had not investigated the identities of Fang Hao and the others before picking a fight. At this moment, they were also a little unsure of what to do. Subconsciously, they glanced at the second-floor window of the tavern on the side. Fang Hao and Jia and the others all noticed this movement and looked up at the second floor. Their angle was different from that of the temple knight. They vaguely saw a person retract their body. And the temple knights below seemed to have received some signal and said directly, "Let's go." After saying that, they were about to turn around and leave. Fang Hao frowned, but he did not stop these people. Instead, he led his people directly to the front of the tavern next to them, blocking the only entrance. The temple knights' expressions changed, and they wanted to stop them, but Fang Hao and the others were faster. They directly entered the tavern, and with a group of people, went up to the second floor. They pushed open the room near the street. The private room was luxuriously decorated. By the table near the window sat a young man dressed in church attire. There were food and drinks on the table, and he was eating casually. Seeing Fang Hao and the others enter, he didn't show any surprise, but instead revealed a calm smile. "Mr. Fang Hao, we meet again." Seeing the person in the room, Fang Hao's eyes narrowed slightly. So it was him, that half-breed Russian. They had met once at the auction held at the Merchant Alliance's station. At that time, they had only nodded from a distance and had no contact. By now, Fang Hao only remembered that he was a saint of the church, and he had already forgotten his specific name. Seeing the Russian, Su-Haid, calmly greet him, he didn't show any unusual emotions because of what had just happened. Fang Hao sat down opposite the Russian and also smiled. "Oh, what should I call you, brother?" "Su-Haid." The Russian, Su-Haid, calmly said his name. At this moment, there were hurried footsteps outside the private room, and the few temple knights from before were seen running up quickly. However, they were stopped outside by the Lionheart Knights, and the two sides were about to fight again. Su-Haid said to the outside of the door, "You wait outside." "Yes," the few people from the temple responded and stood outside the door obediently. "So, it seems I have offended Brother Su in some way, and today you arrange for your subordinates to come and trouble me," Fang Hao said directly without hiding anything. Su-Haid, however, had a calm expression, not knowing if it was because he had been in the church for a long time, or if it was just his personality. He was similar to the people from the church, giving a feeling of being somewhat expressionless. "I asked them to invite you over, but I didn't expect them to offend Lord Fang Hao," Su-Haid said. Fang Hao didn't believe his nonsense. At that time, these few people had glanced at the second floor before giving up on being unreasonable with Fang Hao. It was clearly at his instigation. Fang Hao also didn't plan to delve into this. "I'm here, speak. What do you want to see me about?" "I heard that Lord Fang Hao has some connection with the undead." As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere in the entire room instantly became tense again. Su-Haid had just apologized, but now he brought up this matter again. Actually, Fang Hao's connection with the undead was no secret. The skeleton merchant would bring goods to the cities of the crossing every day. Although Su-Haid's city did not have a skeleton merchant station there, it was not difficult to learn some things in the channel. "What? Are you going to judge me on behalf of the God of Light?" Fang Hao asked with a cold laugh. "The undead are the natural enemies of all living beings. Once the council and the church know about it, they will likely eradicate your city at all costs. By then, I'm afraid there will truly be no place for you in the 100 cities," Su-Haid said, picking up his wine glass and taking a sip of wine. He looked completely like a powerful superior. Fang Hao naturally understood Su-Haid's meaning. This was a threat. He knew that he must have a connection with the undead, and he was serious about letting his subordinates try to arrest him just now. He just didn't expect Fang Hao to be so tough, not taking the people from the church seriously even in Silverwing City. Now, he had even laid his cards on the table. But at the same time, the fact that he was saying this now should mean there was something else. Otherwise, why would he be saying these things to him now? "Just say what you want to say." Su-Haid put down his wine glass. "Help me do a few things, and if you do them well, your secret will naturally not reach the ears of the church." "Oh, what do you want me to do? Tell me about it." Fang Hao's eyes flickered. Su-Haid looked at Fang Hao seriously for a few moments and said directly, "Give me your lord's book. When I devour it, you will be my city lord, and then I will tell you what needs to be done." This Russian was quite cautious. He didn't say things directly. Of course, Fang Hao was just trying to test him, to see if he could pry out anything about the church. Now that the Russian was unwilling to speak, he didn't care. He said with a cold laugh, "You're dreaming. If you don't want to say it, then forget it. See you later." After saying that, he got up to leave. Suhaid didn't expect him to get up and leave so quickly and immediately said, "Aren't you afraid that I'll reveal your secret?" Walking to the door, Fang Hao stopped. Suhaid thought Fang Hao was still afraid and was about to continue threatening him a couple of times. Then he heard Fang Hao's voice, full of killing intent, sound again. "Cherish your current life. Don't seek death yourself." After saying that, Fang Hao turned and left, leaving only Suhaid, sitting on the chair in a daze, his hand holding the wine glass suspended in midair. He remained motionless for a long time. He could feel that Fang Hao was not joking. Coupled with his past behavior, if he was pushed too far, he might really come and kill him. However, he was now a saint of the church, and his territory was a church faction building. How could he kill him? Where did he get the capital? Ridiculous. Suhaid sneered, picked up his wine glass again, and started drinking. Fang Hao and the others left, and the temple knights and attendants outside the door also came in. He said coldly, "Sir, should I gather the believers? It's not difficult to capture him." Suhaid looked out the window at the few people walking out of the tavern. He smiled slightly and said calmly, "No rush, don't touch him before the council." "Yes, sir." Suhaid sneered, still looking out the window until the figures of the few people disappeared. "What was that?" And Jia said angrily. "Exactly what was that?" Luo Li also spoke. "Damn dog, if I catch him, I'll smash his dog head." "Smash his dog head." Luo Li still chimed in. "Do you want to eat that?" And Jia glanced at it. "Eat." After leaving the tavern, the two of them cursed and swore all the way, greeting Suhaid from head to toe. But they didn't delay eating. They ate while cursing. After strolling for the entire morning, they returned to their residence in the afternoon. No one came to trouble them again. At 2 in the afternoon, there was a knock on the door. "Lord City Lord, the madam is throwing a tantrum. Can you go and see her if you have time?" The maid's voice came from outside the door. Throwing a tantrum? Rebecca's stress tolerance was very strong, and it was relatively rare for her to throw a tantrum. Coincidentally, Fang Hao also planned to tell Rebecca about what happened today. So he said, "Okay, I'll be out right away." After getting dressed neatly, he walked out of the room. He walked down the long corridor and stopped in front of a door. Standing at the door, he could hear the sound of things being thrown inside. To make Rebecca so angry, it seemed the matter was not small. He left the maid outside the door and directly pushed the door open and walked in. As soon as he entered, he saw Rebecca raising a stack of books high above her head, about to throw them down. Seeing Fang Hao come in, she instantly calmed down a lot. She slammed the books onto the table with a slap, sat back in her chair, and put on a stern face. "What's wrong? Which blind fool has angered our city lord's wife?" Fang Hao walked over, put his hands on her shoulders, and asked softly. Rebecca was still angry. Standing behind her, he could see her full chest heaving violently due to anger. It was as if someone was inflating a balloon and then deflating it. Inflating it again and deflating it again. Rebecca took a deep breath and said angrily, "There was a traitor in Lysis City who sold illicit information to Grote. Once these things are leaked, I'm afraid we won't be able to leave Silverwing City." "Who is Grote?" Fang Hao was suddenly confused. The people in this world have names that are too long and have strange pronunciations, so he could only remember the people around him. After a long time, he couldn't tell who was who. Rebecca sighed. "It's the council representative who attended on behalf of the merchant group this year, from the Marshall family, the man who was kicked unconscious by a SETI back then." "Oh, him. How did he get the information? Is the news accurate?" Hearing this, Fang Hao knew who he was. All the way here, setting up ambushes on the roadside, it was all his doing. He had so many tricks up his sleeve. When the attack didn't work, he came up with this move. It was news that Olivia specifically arranged for someone to deliver today, so it must be accurate, Rebecca said. "Is it that serious?" "There are some unspoken rules that everyone knows. As long as your enemy doesn't find evidence, it's fine. Now, our handle has already fallen into Grote's hands." Rebecca sighed repeatedly. Actually, she should have considered this earlier. To clear out the faceless in the city, Rebecca dealt with a large number of nobles in the city. These nobles were connected through marriage, cooperation, and other means. The relationships were intricate and very complex. Killing so many people would definitely leave many hidden dangers. However, Rebecca didn't expect it to come so quickly and so ruthlessly, wanting to kill her using the Federation's methods. Fang Hao thought for a moment. At that time, you can just deny it and say that the evidence they have is fabricated. Rebecca hit him lightly. Do you think this is child's play? Just denying it stubbornly is enough? I'm afraid that at that time, there will be traitors from Lysis City who will identify you on the spot. What's the point of denying it? Fang Hao thought about it and felt that she was right. This wasn't a student fight where you could just grit your teeth and deny it. Grote had gone to great lengths to get this onto the council agenda, so he must have made ample preparations. At that time, witnesses and evidence would all be presented, and you wouldn't be able to argue even if you wanted to. Seeing Rebecca's worried face, Fang Hao still comforted her. That's okay. I'm here. I can take you away when the time comes. Rebecca leaned back, resting her head on Fang Hao's belly. She said softly, what's the use of escaping? Grote's goal will still be achieved. I don't know how he singled us out. We can't shake him off no matter what. Fang Hao felt the same way. This Grote was like a stubborn dog, fixated on them. He kept causing trouble over and over again. The previous ambushes failed, and now he had pulled this stunt. This was a clear declaration of hostility. Don't think about it so much. As long as you're alive, there's hope. Lysis City is in your hands, and they can't take it away. At worst, we just won't contact other cities. We're not afraid of the Federation. My troops are enough to protect Lysis City, Fang Hao said, gently kneading her shoulders. You don't understand. Humans are different from other races. Whether it's trade or politics, cities need to establish connections. Once Lysis City is isolated, it will gradually decline on its own within a few years. Rebecca's body also relaxed, not as agitated as before. Fang Hao thought about it and felt that she was right. The orcs' life, while not exactly living like savages, was certainly not as good as that of humans. This was related to their focus on plunder. The human side had much more stable order and was developing quite well. But Fang Hao could also solve these problems. His territory was already large enough. Connecting all the cities and establishing a trade circle shouldn't be difficult. Of course, it would be best if they could continue to be members of the 100 cities, but if not, their internal resources would be enough for them to develop and survive. After thinking it through, he continued, you don't have to worry about this either. Now there are more cities in the territory. At that time, we can establish our own trade network and live very well. Rebecca nodded, indicating that she understood. In the past, she had to bear all these things and find solutions herself. Now that she had someone to talk to and help her find solutions, she felt a sense of reliance. Of course, her talking so much with Fang Hao was also looking for a fallback. She hadn't given up yet. Before the council, she still had a chance. Feeling the massage on her shoulders, Rebecca closed her eyes, enjoying the thoughtful massage from the person she admired. She leaned on him quietly for a while. Rebecca, who had her eyes closed, suddenly felt something was wrong. A strange feeling suddenly came from her body. Fang Hao, all right, no more messing around. Let's chat, and then we'll go down to eat together. Fang Hao sat down on the chair and pulled Rebecca to sit in his arms. These little actions between them weren't the first or second time, and Rebecca could accept them. Holding hands, they chatted for a while. Fang Hao was a young man after all. With such a beautiful woman in his arms, his heart felt restless again. His hands started to become restless. Seeing the danger, Rebecca quickly pressed his hand down and said angrily, why are you doing this again? It's broad daylight, are you crazy? Rebecca's attitude this time was very different from before. It wasn't resistance or rejection, but rather mentioning that it was daytime. Fang Hao tentatively said again, then I'll come over tonight. Rebecca was much older than Fang Hao and knew everything. She naturally knew about the matters between men and women. In her heart, she was also very uncomfortable from Fang Hao's teasing. It was just that she used to be more resistant to men. Now that she had accepted Fang Hao, she hadn't thought about what would happen next. It was fine when they were just touching and groping in the past, but if they were to actually live together, she really couldn't bring herself to do it. She hesitated for a moment and said softly, Fang Hao, give me a little more time. Fang Hao nodded. This kind of thing wasn't urgent. Rebecca's loyalty had also reached 98 points, and he wasn't afraid of her running away, so he wasn't in a hurry for a day or two. Okay, I'll listen to you, Fang Hao said, then kissed her directly. This time, Rebecca didn't resist. After a long time, Rebecca's face was red. She turned her head away and said, "All right, it's time to eat. If you mess around again, I'll be angry." Twilight. Silverwing City's commercial street was even livelier. In a private room on the second floor of a tavern, Sandike stood by the window, looking in the direction of the city gate. Beside him stood a subordinate. With a hint of anxiety on his face, he hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Boss, more than 300 people from our group went out. By rights, they should have completed the mission and returned by now, but the people haven't returned, and no one is answering the transmission conch." Sandike felt a faint unease in his heart. His fingers kept tapping on the windowsill. The intelligence said there were only over 100 of them, and most of them were militia. Even if there was a problem, it's impossible for over 300 people to not have a single one return. Something must have gone wrong. That made sense. Even if the people he arranged didn't succeed in the ambush, a few of the 300-plus people should have escaped back. But now, a day and a night had passed. Not a single piece of news had come back. Tap, tap, tap. As the two were talking, there was a hurried sound of climbing stairs outside the door. Soon, the sound of footsteps stopped outside the private room door. "Leader, there's news." Sandik's expression changed. He returned to the table and sat down, once again becoming the calm mercenary leader. "Come in." The door opened, and a dusty young man walked in. After a slight bow, he said, "Leader, we found the bodies of the group members. They're all dead." Crack. The water glass in Sandik's hand fell directly to the ground and shattered into pieces. Even though he had already thought that something might have happened, he didn't expect it to be this worst-case scenario. This was over 300 people. Just like that, they were gone? "Are you sure? You didn't see wrong?" Sandik's voice was a little louder. The subordinate who was inquiring about the news trembled and immediately said, "Leader, I know everyone in the group. I won't be mistaken." Bang! Sandike slammed his fist on the table. The wooden table instantly shattered. He roared, damn it. Like an enraged giant bear, he smashed everything in the room. After a while of crashing and banging, he looked at his subordinate again and asked coldly, "Has that kid's team come back?" "They've returned." Not only has his team returned, but Li Rong's people have also entered the city safely. "Damn, that little bitch Li Rong. It must be her doing. Otherwise, how could that kid with only 50 people be fine?" Sandik's face was ferocious. Their ambush target was the pretty boy from Lysis City. He only brought 50 people with him, and his base wasn't here. His own 300-plus people all died outside. No matter how he thought about it, it was Li Rong's doing. This little woman was still talking to him about the commercial street 2 days ago. Afterward, she set him up. "Leader, what do we do next? Are we still going to kill that pretty boy?" the subordinate continued to ask. Sandike took 2 deep breaths, forcibly suppressing the anger in his heart. At this moment, compared to the pretty boy, he hated Li Rong more. After thinking for a moment, he said, "Our brothers can't die for nothing. Get ready. We'll send a big gift to the Immortal Dream Tower tonight." "Understood, leader." The night grew deeper. The bustling Silverwing City also reached the time for lights out and rest. The busy people had all returned to their rooms to rest. Inside the room, Fang Hao was playing chess with Njia. Luo Li was beside them, helping Njia analyze the current situation. The two occasionally leaned in to discuss a few words, afraid that they might miss a move and be exploited by Fang Hao. After discussing for a while, Njia picked up a piece, held it between 2 fingers, and was about to tentatively place it. Halfway through, she also looked up at Fang Hao's expression. Seeing that Fang Hao was expressionless, with a pop, the piece was placed on the board. "No regrets after placing a piece. Are you sure?" Fang Hao said. Njia was stunned and looked back at Luo Li. Then, she said firmly, "Who are you trying to fool? With your little tricks, you still want to scare us." "Exactly, who are you trying to scare?" Fang Hao shrugged. He picked up a piece and placed it on the board, connecting 5 pieces. Njia was stunned. Then her face showed an angry expression, and she raised her hand to flip the table. Fang Hao held her down. Hey, it's not that serious, not that serious. Ah, and Jia was about to say something. She suddenly stopped her actions, sniffing slightly with her nose. Luo Li beside her did the same. Then they looked out the window. They saw that in one part of the city at the end of their vision, the entire street was ablaze under the night sky. From a distance, they could see the leaping flames, and thick smoke covered the sky. It's the commercial street. Why is there such a big fire? And Jia and Luo Li looked somewhat surprised. In an orc tribe, with such a big fire, they probably wouldn't even bother to put it out. The chief would just lead the people to migrate. Tap, tap, tap. Footsteps sounded, and Rebecca, with her maid, directly pushed the door open and entered. There's a fire outside. Rebecca had just opened her mouth when she saw the two standing by the window, with Luo Li squatting on the windowsill. They were all looking at the location of the fire. Rebecca also walked over and thought for a moment before saying, "Should we go and take a look?" Fang Hao shook his head. "Don't go out. Someone will go to put out the fire later. If we go now, it's hard to say if we can help, and it's easy to be mistaken for arsonists. With such a big fire, I'm afraid a whole street is burned down," Rebecca said, shaking her head. City construction was the most expensive thing. Rebecca was very clear about this. Probably not. Silverwing City can't even handle a fire, can it? It's not a remote little place like ours, Fang Hao said softly. Indeed. After Fang Hao finished speaking, in the clear night sky, there was a sudden clap of thunder. Immediately afterward, dark clouds rolled in, covering an entire area above the commercial street. Splash, splash, splash. Then, heavy rain poured down. Water mages had made their move. The fire in the commercial street had stopped in the second half of the night. But the aftermath of the fire did not stop. A large number of people in the city were cleaning up the ruins. There were also people dressed as guards investigating the cause of the incident. After breakfast, Fang Hao took in Jia and the others to see what was happening here. When they arrived, they found that the surrounding area was full of people. They gathered around, chatting about someone setting the fire and whose family had been burned to ashes. Anyway, they were all talking about the fire yesterday. Fang Hao and his party were strong and sturdy, and they directly squeezed through the crowd. They saw the scene of the whole street. The traces of burning were not just one or two buildings. At a glance, the fronts of a whole row of buildings were black, and some were still emitting green smoke. Some people in yellow clothes were dealing with the places that were still smoking. Fortunately, the mage summoned heavy rain last night, otherwise the fire might have burned half the city. Looking at the scene in front of him, Fang Hao suddenly thought of Li Rong. He didn't know anyone else here, but he was somewhat familiar with Li Rong, and her shop happened to be on this street. Thinking in his heart, he squeezed through the crowd and walked towards Xianmeng building. As he walked inside, he realized that the fire was more serious than he thought. It seemed that the fire should have started from Xianmeng building and then slowly spread to other shops. Everything was burned. Naturally, there was no need to go through the door. He stepped on the collapsed wall and entered inside. The interior was also a mess. Cosmetics, clothes, jewelry, nothing was left. Just as he was about to take out the Lord's book to ask about Li Rong's situation, he vaguely heard sobs coming from inside the broken wall. The sobs were not loud, as if trying to control them, but from the hoarse and trembling crying, he could hear the other party's sadness. Fang Hao and the others walked past the broken wall. They saw Li Rong squatting in the corner, covered in carbon ash. Her whole head was buried in her arms, and her body was constantly shaking. Hearing someone coming in, Li Rong hurriedly wiped away her tears and looked up. Her face, which was crying like a pear blossom in the rain, had become a little cat. When she saw that it was Fang Hao who came in, the tears that had just been suppressed could no longer be controlled and flowed down. Fang Hao could understand how sad she was. She had worked hard for so long, and originally thought that everything was on the right track. But a fire destroyed everything. The second branch, the business operation, everything turned into ruins with the fire. Fang Hao thought for a while, squatted down and gently patted her trembling shoulder. He softly comforted, "It's okay, everything will be fine." It would have been better if he hadn't said anything, but with this persuasion. Li Rong turned around and threw herself into Fang Hao's arms, crying even louder. soaking Fang Hao's clothes. It's gone, it's all gone. Li Rong has her own territory and does not live in the city. Last night, she only heard thunder, but she didn't know about the fire. But when she entered the city today, she found something was wrong. When she saw the Xianming building turned into ruins, Li Rong was dumbfounded. Her mind was blank. She rushed in alone, digging in the ruins, looking for surviving goods. But with such a big fire, how could anything be left? What she dug out was just coke. At this time, her whole body was buried in Fang Hao's arms. She kept sobbing, vaguely saying things like it's gone, nothing is left. Fang Hao had heard Li Rong's business dreams, and he also knew the sadness of shattered dreams and everything being gone. He still gently patted her shoulder, comforting her. The factory is still there. Your foundation is still there. Everything can be restarted. Woo woo woo. Li Rong cried for a while and calmed down a little. She wiped the tears from her face and raised her head from Fang Hao's arms. Her originally good-looking face was completely turned into a painted face by tears and carbon ash. It was as if she had been burned by the fire as well. Wipe your face, it looks like a cat. Fang Hao handed over a handkerchief. Li Rong took it. She wiped it on her face, but this wipe made the mud and ash on her face even more even. Seeing that her emotions were stable, Fang Hao continued to ask, "Is anyone injured?" Li Rong was a little absent-minded, and her face no longer had the cheerfulness of the past. She murmured and replied, "No, no one stays in the store at night. It's just that my store is gone like this. It's okay, just rebuild it when the time comes. It's good that people are okay." Fang Hao saw that she was getting darker and darker as she wiped. He took out water, wet the handkerchief, and wiped her face, revealing her fair face under the black ash. Eh. At this moment, Jia suddenly made a sound in the ruins. She reached out and picked it up on the ground and pulled out a long iron box. Li Rong sniffed and glanced at the iron box in Njia's hand. The crying stopped immediately, and she hurried over. She took the iron box from Njia's hand, opened the lid, and revealed a stack of gold coins neatly stacked inside. These were all the money from recent store sales. Njia didn't care that Li Rong had snatched the items she had found. Now that there is money in the territory, Njia naturally doesn't care about this money anymore. Njia's ability to explore treasures and search has always been admired by Fang Hao. She found the money casually and was not surprised. Li Rong hugged the money box, took several deep breaths, and calmed her mood. When her emotions had recovered almost, she asked softly, "Fang Hao, Njia, why are you here? We saw the fire here last night and came to see how you were doing." Fang Hao explained. The fire was a bit strange. Silver Wing City is a big city. According to the city level, it is probably above level 15. The shops in the commercial street are all built with neatly chiseled stone bricks. It is difficult for such a big fire to occur after the shops are closed. Fortunately, the mage summoned heavy rain. Otherwise, I don't know how many buildings would be destroyed and how many people would die. Thank you, everyone. Li Rong expressed her gratitude. Her side was on fire, but she didn't expect that the first ones to come were Fang Hao and the others, who had cooperated once. Next, Fang Hao wanted to ask what to do next. But just as he was about to say half a sentence, he heard a trot and a shout from outside the courtyard wall. "Sisterly, sisterly, there's news." The sound of footsteps was getting closer and closer, and then he saw several employees of Xianming building running in one after another. When they saw Fang Hao and his party, the employees were slightly stunned. "Boss, you are here too." The time-traveling employee recognized Fang Hao and still called him boss, although he didn't understand why Fang Hao and the others were here. But obviously, now is not the time to say these things. Fang Hao nodded. "Yeah." After saying hello, the male employee's gaze returned to Li Rong. Li Rong had stopped crying at this time. Except for the red circles around her eyes, she couldn't see any other expressions. Her face had returned to the serious female boss image, but it was a bit flowery. "What's wrong so rash?" Li Rong took out a cigarette and lit it. "Sisterly, we just asked the patrol guards, and they said we should think about whether we have offended anyone. The fire last night was arson," the male clerk said directly. "Arson?" Li Rong's eyes narrowed. How sad she was just now, how angry she is now. Everything she owned was completely destroyed, and it turned out that someone was targeting her. Yes, the patrol team said that our place was the source of the fire, and they also found traces of accelerants. They told us to think about who could do it and then notify them. The male clerk continued. Some of the clerks here are time travelers and some are natives. But this job is still good. There is no hard labor. They just sell goods and teach women how to put on makeup every day. The income is also very considerable. Originally, this job could have continued, at least through the winter, and the whole family could have had a good life. But now, a fire has destroyed their jobs. They know someone did it, and they are equally angry. Li Rong nodded and said, "Okay, I know. Look around here and see if there is anything else we can take away." "Okay, boss." The clerks began to sort through the ruins. The third floor is jade jewelry, and Jia can find things, and they may also be able to find some intact pieces. If they don't find them now, when the people in the city clean up, there will be no place to find them. Outside the ruins, Li Rong smoked a cigarette, thinking about things in her mind. Fang Hao looked at the environment and was afraid that Li Rong had no place to stay, so he said, "Let's go. Let's go to my place to sort things out first. It's not far from here, so it will be convenient for you to come over if anything happens." Li Rong was just thinking about who set the fire. Hearing Fang Hao's words, she hesitated. This is not good. Fang Hao knew what she was hesitating about. He said directly, "It's messy here, and you can't think of anything. Let's go to my place and think slowly." This time, Li Rong did not refuse. With her current situation, if she can get closer to Fang Hao, it would be a powerful thing for her. "Thank you, Fang Hao." Fang Hao nodded and led Li Rong towards his residence. The residence of the Lexus City Army is a manor allocated by the government. The building is large, and there are also many vacant rooms. After Fang Hao and the others came back, they asked someone to boil water for Li Rong so she could wash up. She now looks like a little black man who just came back from the Congo. Fang Hao asked someone to take care of Li Rong. Then he went to busy himself with his own affairs. The meeting is getting closer and closer, and in the few days before the official start of the meeting, there are temporary small meetings. Now Rebecca has to go out every day, attending meetings and contacting some forces that can be won over. Back to the room. The sound of the conch shell calling came from the storage space. "Take it out and take a look." It was a message sent by Lorena. Perhaps it was because Lorena's personality was relatively fierce in the past, and because he had already begun to seduce Rebecca. Seeing the news, he felt inexplicably nervous. "Take out the conch shell and put it to your ear," and Lorena's pleasant but unemotional voice immediately came from inside. Those rats brought back the news. Hearing this short sentence, Fang Hao was stunned. So fast. Yesterday, Rebecca mentioned to him that there were traitors in Lexus City. After being intimate with Rebecca, after returning to the room, he used the conch shell to contact Lorena. Lorena was a little reluctant, and Fang Hao felt guilty because of Rebecca's matter. After discussing for a while, and mentioning that this was to help Rebecca, Lorena compromised and went to investigate the traitor's matter. Fang Hao didn't actually want her to investigate. It takes too long for humans to investigate this kind of thing. By the time the evidence is found, the meeting will be over. What he was looking for was the skull rats in the underground world. Skull rats have the largest intelligence network in Lexus City. Even the faceless one at that time was completed with the help of skull rats' intelligence. It is not difficult to investigate some traitors. But I didn't expect the speed to be so fast. Fang Hao picked up the conch shell and put it to his mouth and said, "Who are they?" Soon, Lorena's voice rang again. "A total of 14 people, 5 of whom have not been found. The rest have been brought under my control." "Good fellow, there are quite a few people. This is no longer as simple as buying them off. It's more like spies who were arranged in advance." "Who are these 5 people? I need a list," Fang Hao continued. "Okay, the maid Citizen, the internal affairs officer Makas." Lorena neatly recited 5 names, including Rebecca's maid and local officials. After Rebecca left, these people did not appear for various reasons. They should have already secretly arrived in Silverwing City, just waiting to appear at the meeting to identify Rebecca and catch her off guard. "Okay, I know," Fang Hao replied. Just as he was about to put away the conch shell, he heard Lorena's voice again. Her tone was slightly cautious. Ahem. Is everything going well on your side? It's going well. I'll go back after this matter is resolved and the meeting is over, Fang Hao replied. Rebecca is fine, right? You didn't bully her, did you? Lorena said again. He had never heard Lorena speak in this tone before. In normal times, Fang Hao might have said a few sarcastic words, but now he didn't dare. His mind even began to imagine the scene of Lorena going crazy after she found out about his and Rebecca's situation after he went back. Now is not the time to think about these things. If you delay too long, she might become suspicious. He picked up the conch shell and said, Everything is fine. Why would I bully her? I also bought you a gift, and I'll give it to you when I get back. Okay, I know. At the end, she changed back to her cold and indifferent appearance. In the call, Fang Hao opened the Lord's book again, re-examined Lorena's loyalty. Lonely Night Beauty, Lorena and Tobias, current loyalty 67. Okay, it has reached 67. She probably won't kill me. Fang Hao pushed the door open and walked out. The door of the opposite room also opened at this time. Li Rong came out after taking a shower, wearing a beige short shirt and tight-fitting trousers. The slender and straight thighs were tightly wrapped in long trousers, and she walked out like this. Her skin was already very white, and wearing such a dress changed her temperament. She is no longer the shrewd and bold female boss, but more like a clean and beautiful young woman. She is wearing spare clothes brought by Njia. Although Njia's figure is healthy, her buns are still a little small. When Li Rong wears it, her chest and hips are tight-fitting. Mr. Fang Hao. Well, have you thought about who is targeting you? Fang Hao asked. A murderous aura instantly rose in Li Rong's eyes. Yes, on the other side. Temporary meeting hall. Before the official assembly began, several small meetings were held daily. The discussions were all about the Federation's plans for the coming year. As the meeting ended, representatives began leaving in groups. Rebecca didn't have many friends here, so naturally, there was no one for her to leave with. At this moment, a figure walked over. Sitting down next to Rebecca, he said, Madam Rebecca. Looking up, it was Tavik from Purse City. Tavik was originally a cloth merchant in Purse City, later supported by Fang Hao to become the city lord. This time, he naturally represented Purse City at the assembly. However, to avoid suspicion, he didn't meet with Fang Hao, and any matters were conveyed verbally through others. City Lord Tavik. Rebecca smiled. Tavik nodded and cautiously glanced around, seeing that no one was paying attention to them. He then said softly, The church mentioned the undead in the north to me this time. I'm afraid news has already reached their ears. To the north of Purse City was Fang Hao's territory. Although most of the undead had been placed in the hidden soldier's cave, there were still Earth Spirit girls leading the undead on patrols. Occasionally, residents and merchant caravans would encounter them. As long as they didn't attack or approach the city without permission, they wouldn't be attacked by the undead. But when this news reached the church, it would be a huge problem. Rebecca's brows furrowed, and she said, No one mentioned it in the meeting. Yes, the church contacted me privately and asked about the undead situation. The church is paying attention to that area. Although I assured them that Purse City was not threatened by the undead, from what the church said, it's very likely they will establish a temple in Purr next year, Tavik said. Purse City was located on the northern border of the human 100 cities, and the location of Fang Hao City itself belonged to the uninhabited area outside of human influence. If it were to be classified, it would belong to the Orc territory. In the past, Purse City's development was at the bottom, and the church rarely paid attention to this city. This year, it seems they have started to pay attention. Okay, I will discuss this with Fang Hao when I return and see what he thinks, Rebecca said softly. Other people were passing by. Tavik smiled and changed the subject. Regarding the cloth from Purse City, I hope it can still be sold in Lysith City next year. Yes, I will arrange for people to be responsible for clearing the trade routes to ensure their safety. After the people passing by left, Tavik continued, The church is also inquiring about the temple in Lysith City. Their words implied they wanted me to provide them with information. Rebecca's expression froze, and her face became even more unpleasant. She didn't know what was wrong with the temple, but it should also be related to Fang Hao. After all, She was also aware that Fang Hao had a strong connection to the Undead faction. Okay, I understand. I will be careful, Rebecca said. Tavik nodded, stood up, and smiled. Haha. Next year's business will rely on your care, madam. Rebecca gave a polite smile. It's my pleasure. Then I won't disturb you any longer, Tavik said, then turned and left. After Tavik left, Rebecca was also about to leave. But before she could stand up, she saw a man in noble attire stride over. Grote Marshall, the assembly representative for the 100 Cities Merchant Guild. At the same time, he was the mastermind behind the troubles Rebecca and others encountered on their journey. Grote approached with a wine glass, a slight smile on his face. As if he had just accidentally discovered Rebecca, he greeted her. Ah, Madam Rebecca, you haven't left yet. It's been a long time since we last met. Rebecca looked at the man with the smug smile on his face. Her heart was filled with disgust, but here, she still maintained basic etiquette, nodding slightly in response. Grote maintained his smile, his gaze greedily sweeping over Rebecca's impressive figure. Madam Rebecca, I heard that Lysith City has been facing some troubles recently. If you consider us friends, you can tell me, and the Marshall family will. Rebecca was not in the mood to play along with this guy here. She knew his purpose clearly. The biggest threat to Lysith City was him, and saying these words now was a threat to her. Without waiting for him to finish, she immediately interrupted. Thank you, but no need. Lysith City is fine, nothing is wrong. Regarding Rebecca's cold words, Grote's eyes showed an expected smile, and he said, Madam Rebecca, I've received some unofficial news. After you left, someone bribed people in Lysith City and obtained a lot of your internal information. I'm afraid by the time the assembly officially begins, these matters will appear in the assembly as evidence. Given your current situation, alas, it might affect your position. He paused, his expression mocking, his gaze openly directed at Rebecca's chest and lower abdomen, and continued, Actually, Rebecca, you know, we're old acquaintances. If you have difficulties, you can tell me, and we can think of a solution together. Plus, with the connections of our Marshall family, the problem isn't very difficult to solve. If you don't mind, you can come to my place, have a drink together, and then discuss. If one didn't understand him, this set of words would truly sound like he was thinking of a solution for an old friend. And Olivia had already tipped off Rebecca a few days ago. She had told her the news that Grote had obtained information about Lysith City. Rebecca's face was already showing anger. She was utterly disgusted with this hypocritical, insidious man who always bothered her. Without waiting for him to finish, she interrupted again, saying, Mr. Grote, please leave here. I have nothing to say to you. Rebecca's voice was quite loud, even attracting curious glances from other representatives around. But seeing it was Grote and Rebecca, they just watched from a distance, with no intention of coming to help. With such a scene, Grote also found it difficult to continue pestering her. After all, even though nobles were insidious and cunning behind the scenes, they still had to maintain an upright image publicly. Grote shrugged, a hint of gloom flashing in his eyes. He no longer concealed it and said with a cold smile, Rebecca, I gave you a chance, but you didn't take it. I hope you don't come begging me on your knees later, asking me to let you off the hook. He had desired this woman for a long time. Elegant and noble, she was much more appealing than the women he had obtained. Conquering such a woman would give him a greater sense of accomplishment. Moreover, he was not in a hurry. He had evidence concerning Lysith City, and reality would force her to yield to him. By then, he would completely crush the pride of the woman in front of him. Rebecca's face flushed with anger upon hearing these words. Even though she tried her best to maintain noble etiquette, her fingers were tightly clenched into fists, appearing white from the effort. She wanted to say something, but she had no allies here, and any argument would only make her more passive. It was already a negotiation of kicking someone while they were down, and Grote held the dominant position. And not far away, a few male and female representatives walked over. These people had been watching from the side and were with Grote. Haha, Mr. Grote, it seems Madam Rebecca doesn't appreciate your kindness, a male representative said with a smile, stroking his small mustache. Exactly, Grote. You can pick any good woman in this city. Why bother with such an outsider? Another richly dressed old woman said in a sarcastic tone. Grote put away his previous insidious expression and showed a friendly smile, saying, I just saw an old friend in difficulty and wanted to help. Since Rebecca has it under control, I won't disturb her any longer. After speaking, he walked away with the people next to him, chatting and laughing. With Grote gone, Rebecca's expression was still full of anger. Sitting in the chair, her face was gloomy. Meanwhile, a CD, waiting outside the door, came in to check when Rebecca didn't come out for a long time. When she saw Rebecca sitting alone in the hall, she quickly walked over. Miss Rebecca, are you all right? Acidi asked softly. Acidi was an orange-level hero and also female. She had been arranged by Fang Hao to stay by Rebecca's side to protect her safety. Hearing Acidi's voice, Rebecca snapped out of it. I'm fine, let's go. A smile still on her face, showing no sign of any abnormality. Everything that had just happened seemed as if it hadn't happened at all. Oh, the carriage is ready. Let's go back first. Acidi led the way. Okay. Rebecca stood up and followed Acidi out. She didn't know why. The moment Acidi's voice sounded in her ear, all the things Rebecca was worried about disappeared, and she had only one thought in her mind. She still had Fang Hao, and he would handle these matters well. On the other side, Fang Hao returned to the room and signaled Li Rong to sit opposite him. As soon as he entered, he smelled the faint fragrance of a woman who had just bathed. He poured Li Rong a glass of fruit wine. He had only asked casually just now, but he didn't expect that in the time it took to take a bath, Li Rong had actually figured out who set the fire. Who? Li Rong's eyes instantly flashed with a sharp look, and she gritted her teeth and said, Sandike. Sandike? Sandike had appeared frequently in Fang Hao's sight during this period. Previously, after exploring the underground palace and returning, the team was ambushed. It was done by Sandike's subordinates. However, as the team suffered no losses and this was Silver Wing City, he didn't immediately deal with him. He didn't expect that Li Rong's first suspicion would be him. Are you sure? Fang Hao was a little doubtful. Sure. I just received a message that someone saw the person who set the fire. It was Sandike's subordinate. Li Rong's eyes were full of anger. Li Rong had a high reputation among the Transmigrator group in Silver Wing City. Although they hadn't formed any gang or force, if someone were to choose a representative figure, it would definitely be Li Rong in Silver Wing City. And just now, while Li Rong was taking a bath, she received a message from someone else on her lord's book. Someone saw Sandike's subordinate sneaking into the commercial street, which had already closed and turned off its lights last night. Not long after this subordinate came out, the big fire started. And the fire was very large, illuminating the entire area brightly. Comparing this, plus the enmity between the two sides in the past few days, there was no need to doubt. It must have been Sandike who did it. An ordinary person couldn't cause such a large fire to retaliate. What do you plan to do? Fang Hao looked at Li Rong. Li Rong reached out to touch her cigarette. But she found that she was wearing Njia's clothes, so she picked up the wine glass instead and took a sip of fruit wine. After a moment of silence, she said, Follow the rules. A life for a life, pay back what you owe. Upon hearing this, Fang Hao was slightly surprised. Why was she bringing up Jianghu rules? Do you have any ideas? Fang Hao continued to ask. Li Rong looked at Fang Hao for a moment, then said softly, Boss Fang Hao, how much do those guns you used last time sell for? The Lionheart Knights were equipped with bolt-action rifles. But in Lysith City, they were all kept by Fang Hao in his storage space. Only when they left the city would he take them out and distribute them to the Lionheart Knights. This was also because he was afraid that if he did something later and bullets were discovered, it would be traced back to him. And Li Rong found that Fang Hao even had rifles. She was even more surprised. After returning to her territory, she searched Fang Hao's shop on the channel. She found that he was still selling the same old items and had not put rifles up for sale. You want to use a rifle to kill him? Fang Hao guessed her idea. The ruthless look on Li Rong's face remained unchanged, and she said, Yes, my subordinates aren't high level, and they might not be his match in a real fight, so I want to buy 2 guns and just blow him away. It was clear that Li Rong was serious this time. Fang Hao also wanted to kill Sandike. But the other party had been in the city and was better at using the rules of Silverwing City. Once a conflict occurred between the two sides in the city, it was very likely that Sandike would be fine, while Li Rong would be wanted by the city. By then, even her own city would be attacked by Silver Wing City. Fang Hao thought about it and felt that Li Rong's idea was too impulsive. Perhaps there was a better way to kill him. Li Rong, I also want Sandike dead, but you can't be reckless. If Silver Wing City finds out that your two groups clashed, Sandike can leave with his people, but your city is nearby. Can you leave? Fang Hao advised softly. This. Li Rong didn't know how to answer after hearing this. Her shop was burned, and she had already made up her mind to kill Sandike regardless of the cost. But Fang Hao wouldn't give her a gun, so she didn't even have the chance to disregard the cost. Relying solely on her own people, she could only fight the other party, and the chance of killing Sandike was not high. I can't worry about that much anymore. If he doesn't die, how can I, Li Rong, open a shop in the future? Transmigrators already have little status in the city. If this isn't resolved properly, then the shop will be burned a second time after it's opened, Li Rong said angrily. Fang Hao shook his head and said softly, he should definitely die, and the people behind him should also die, but we can't impulsively throw everything away. Li Rong also knew that Fang Hao was right. She was just holding back a fire in her heart. She took 2 deep breaths before saying, then do you have any good ideas? Fang Hao had only one way to deal with such matters. That was to eliminate the root cause forever. Sandike must definitely die, otherwise, he would likely cause more trouble. It's just that he wasn't familiar with Silver Wing City, and to kill him without anyone knowing still required a detailed investigation. Do you know where Sandike usually is? Fang Hao stroked his chin and asked softly. Li Rong shook her head and said, Dragon Fang Tavern. Fang Hao nodded and said, okay, I will arrange this matter. I will notify you via the Lord's book when there is action. Also, don't come to Silver Wing City for the next 2 days, in case Sandike makes a move on you. Li Rong was silent for a moment, and finally nodded. Okay, then I will go back and wait for your news. She stood up, then turned back and looked at Fang Hao seriously. She said softly, if you help me deal with Sandike, this big sister will accompany you for 3 days. Fang Hao was stunned, and the water he had just drunk almost sprayed out. He said, oh, how come both of these feel like benefits for you? Li Rong lightly slapped the table with her fair hand. What do you mean? Are you looking down on me? No, I'm still a child. Why are you telling me this? Fang Hao smiled, then continued. I feel that Sandike will definitely hide, so have your people also pay attention to his whereabouts. Regardless, it was highly likely that Sandike would hide afterwards. Finding him would still require some time and effort. Okay, I will have people keep an eye on him. Once there is news, I will notify you immediately, Li Rong also said seriously. Fang Hao nodded and said to the outside of the door, arrange for someone to escort Li Rong back. The door opened, and the guard respectfully said, Miss Li Rong, please. Li Rong looked at Fang Hao seriously one last time and strode out of the room. In the afternoon, Rebecca returned by carriage. The two met at the staircase. It was clear that Rebecca's expression was somewhat unhappy. Seeing Fang Hao, she said, come to my room. I have something to tell you. Oh, okay. Fang Hao nodded and followed Rebecca into the room. Upon entering the room, a maid prepared fruit tea and pastries for them. After everything was done, she directly exited the room, thoughtfully closing the door behind her. Fang Hao wasn't polite, sitting down at the table and pulling Rebecca into his embrace. The soft sensation enveloped his thigh. Rebecca didn't resist, simply sitting, picking up a pastry from the table and putting it in her mouth. What's going on with the fire? Someone mentioned it today, Rebecca said, looping an arm around Fang Hao's shoulder. Do you remember Li Rong? Rebecca frowned, recalling the transmigrator who tried to seduce you at Olivia's banquet. Fang Hao was speechless, hearing the tone in Rebecca's voice, like a jealous little wife. What seduce? We just discussed cooperating to explore the dungeon. I saw clearly from the second floor that day. When she went to find you, she even pulled her collar down a bit. Don't tell me you didn't notice. I really didn't pay attention. The necklines of those noble ladies at the ball were all pretty low. It was a sea of white flesh. How could I notice whether hers was low or not? You? Rebecca was annoyed, pinching his waist. Fang Hao didn't feel any pain, especially since she didn't use much force. He tightened his embrace around her, smiling and saying, Are you jealous? There's nothing between me and her, Don't overthink it. Rebecca glared at Fang Hao. Who's jealous? I'm just telling you to be more aware. You already have quite a few people around you. In this era, it's an accepted rule that the strong possess more resources. Which of those noble lords isn't surrounded by countless women? And sometimes, this is even used as a topic of boasting, brought up for discussion during leisure time. Similarly, as long as a woman has status, she can also keep a group of gigolos. Rebecca frowned slightly, also feeling that her words and actions today were a bit strange. Although she didn't dislike being intimate with Fang Hao, she certainly wouldn't be jealous. Why would she care if a woman was trying to seduce him? After all, she also quite liked women. After thinking carefully, she felt it should be because their relationship was becoming increasingly close, and in name, they were already husband and wife. If he flirted around in public, wouldn't that be disregarding her? After figuring this out, she no longer had the desire to continue discussing this topic. She changed the topic to today's council meeting. Tavik asked me to tell you that the church has noticed the appearance of undead north of Pearl City. Oh, what did they say? Fang Hao also became serious. Actually, the matter of the undead couldn't be hidden. But for it to reach Silverwing City still surprised him. Tavik said that the church privately contacted him, asking him about the undead to the north, and plans to establish a church temple in Pearl City after winter, Rebecca said softly. The church doesn't know that's my city, right? They don't know. With the church's strength, if they had evidence of you and the undead, they would probably have already started arresting people, Rebecca replied. Actually, someone in the church already knows. That transmigrator, Mauzi, knows about his connection with the undead. It's just that this kind of thing is difficult to use as evidence. That's good. We'll consider the matter of establishing a temple in Pearl City after winter, Fang Hao said after thinking. Whether or not a temple can be established is still a difficult matter to say. Since the other party hasn't taken any action, he doesn't need to be paranoid so early. Rebecca nodded, then continued. Groot hinted at me today. Seeing his confident appearance, he probably has grasped some evidence of Lexus City, saying that he wants me to go to his residence and find him when I've thought it through. Hearing Groot's name, Fang Hao also gritted his teeth in hatred. He really is everywhere. That old lecher, he really doesn't give up. Fang Hao held Rebecca's soft little hand, continuing. Today, Rorana sent a message, saying that a total of 14 people planted around you have been found. So many. Rebecca was shocked, instantly interrupting Fang Hao's following words. She knew that some people must have been planted around her, but she didn't expect there to be so many. Fang Hao nodded, continuing. Rorana has already caught most of the people. Now there are still 5 people who can't be found, and they have likely already arrived in Silverwing City. Next, Fang Hao told Rebecca the names and positions of the 5 people. Hearing the complete information, Rebecca's expression became even more unsightly. The identities of these 5 people were all very important, and naturally, they were also people she used to trust. But now they have become people who betrayed her. Then, what should we do? Rebecca panicked again. If these people were still in Lexus City, she would still have a way to deal with them. But once they are in this Silverwing City, she wouldn't have a very good way. It's okay. I already have a preliminary idea in my mind. It still needs to be improved. You just need to attend the meetings normally these few days. Fang Hao still softly comforted her. Seeing that the council was about to begin, the time left for them to prepare was already running out. He had to perfect the plan as much as possible before the council, so that Groot wouldn't be able to identify Rebecca. Rebecca nodded. Okay, I'm counting on you. The two interacted in the room for a good while. It wasn't until the maid knocked on the door to notify them that the bathwater was ready that Rebecca pushed him away. After tidying herself up, she walked out of the room. Time passed quickly. Tomorrow was the day the council would officially begin. On the main road leading to the central hall of the city, the flags of the Human Federation and the blue and silver flags of Silverwing City were already hung. The entire city was busy, preparing to welcome the most important 100 Cities conference of the year. Compared to the liveliness of Silverwing City, the temporary residents of Lexus City seemed to be shrouded in a gloomy atmosphere. Early in the morning, Rebecca left with a worried look, her face full of sorrow. Inside the room on the 3rd floor, Fang Hao sat at the table, listening to his subordinates' reports. These days, he had planted many informants in the city, investigating Sandek and Groot's intelligence through various means. But they had no foundation in Silverwing City at all. Even though many people were sent out and a lot of money was spent, they still didn't obtain any very useful information. He regretted not bringing the Skull Rat Swarm with him. Those little guys couldn't do anything else, but eavesdropping on human conversations was their forte. After everyone finished reporting and there was no useful information, Fang Hao waved his hand, telling everyone to go back to eat and rest first. He would think of another way. Tomorrow was when the council would begin. No matter what, he couldn't let Groot bring out the evidence of Lexus City. Otherwise, he and Rebecca would both face danger. Now I know Groot's location. If there's no other choice, I'll just have to send him to meet the King of Hell. The original plan was to eliminate the witnesses who ran from Lysis City and destroy the evidence. After the Lysis City team left Silverwing City, he would find time to kill Groot. But now this plan is difficult to implement. If it really doesn't work, he can only kill him directly. After killing him, he would have to set a fire. It would be best to burn the evidence directly, just as Fang Hao was planning to take the risk and act tonight. The Lord's book suddenly issued a private chat notification. Looking at it, it was a message from Li Rong. Fang Hao, I have news about Sandike. After the last fire, everyone was looking for Sandike. But Sandike had disappeared as if he had evaporated into thin air these past few days, and no one could find him. Unexpectedly, Li Rong now has news about Sandike. Where is he? Fang Hao asked. Li Rong replied, I don't know his current location, but I got information that he will be bringing a group of people into the city for a big shot before the city gate closes today. This is a good opportunity for us to take revenge. Seeing this message, Fang Hao frowned. Bringing a group of people into the city? After thinking about it, Fang Hao continued to ask, what big shot? What kind of people are they bringing into the city? Li Rong replied, it should be the noble masters in the city. If they can find Sandike and his people to do things, it must be something that can't be seen in the light. I don't know who they are bringing in. Fang Hao, you must help me. If he dies, I will agree to any conditions you want. Ignoring the implied meaning behind her words, Fang Hao was thinking about the information Li Rong mentioned. Sandike has always been Groot's thug. Could this escort of people secretly into the city be the 5 people who escaped from Lysis City? These past few days, he has arranged for a large number of people, but he has not found these 5 people. If Groot has been housing these 5 people outside the city, it would actually make sense. They don't know much about Silverwing City in the first place. They can house these people in nearby small towns or manors. No matter how hard the people he arranged search, they won't be able to find them outside. Fang Hao, are you there? If you don't help me, my shop will really not be able to continue. You must help me, please. Li Rong, will definitely thank you. Seeing that Fang Hao didn't reply, Li Rong became a little anxious. Her tone was even pleading. Even if Fang Hao made some excessive demands now, Li Rong would probably agree without hesitation. Actually, Li Rong's personality is not bad. Apart from constantly hinting at things to him, she is actually a relatively responsible and strong woman. When will Sandike bring these people into the city? Time and location. Fang Hao continued to ask. Perhaps his plan can still be implemented. Killing a gangster with a criminal record is less noticeable than killing a counselor who is about to participate in the council. Even if Sandike dies, it won't cause any trouble in the city. The information says dusk, North Gate. The specific time and people are not clear. I have already arranged for people to be there. It's still morning, and she has already arranged for people to be there. Women really hold grudges. Okay, I understand. You stay in your own city. Don't send people over, lest you be implicated when people die. Fang Hao instructed. Okay, thank you, Fang Hao. If Sandike dies, this sister will accompany you for 5 days. I won't help. Find someone else. No. I was wrong. Fang Hao thought for a while and continued. If you really want to thank me, then help me with a favor when the time comes. I'm going. I've already given you my whole person. Can I do whatever you want when the time comes? Why are you so clueless? Li Rong sent again, with a hint of complaint in her words. Sister Li, you are also a great beauty. If not, find a man. Aren't the noble masters in the city all up for you to choose? Fang Hao said helplessly. This woman Li Rong is too fierce in her words and actions. Usually, he teases the women around him, but in front of Li Rong, he gets a head of sweat with just a few words. I don't know what to say. This sister just wants to pick you, and you don't have to be responsible. What are you afraid of? Li Rong said again. I'm afraid of you. I'm going to arrange for people to carry out the Sandike plan. I'm not chatting anymore. Okay, if there is any news, be sure to notify this sister. The two hung up the chat. Fang Hao immediately notified and arranged for people to be stationed at the North Gate. Today is his last chance. If there is no follow-up plan from Sandike here, Fang Hao can only let people kill Grote. The sunset glow was rich, dyeing the horizon red. The North Gate was particularly lively today. It seemed that there were many more people than usual, and some people even set up stalls at the city gate, loudly shouting and selling goods. A grocery stall was relatively close. The stall owner wiped his nose while shouting loudly to sell his goods. There was a lot of traffic here, and people would come up to ask the price from time to time. But every time someone asked, they would curse and say that he was crazy about money, and then turn around and leave. The stall owner didn't care, and just curled his lips in the face of the scolding. He didn't say anything. At this time, a person dressed as a beggar came over and squatted down to eat the cake in his hand. The two sat together, like two bored people chatting together. The beggar asked in a low voice, "How is it?" The stall owner replied, "I didn't see anyone. Business is good. I doubled the price, otherwise the goods would be gone." The beggar took 2 more bites of the cake. "Okay, this is the 6th cake I've eaten. I'm afraid I won't be able to shit when I go back. I don't know what's going on." There are quite a lot of kind people today, always throwing some money or buying some cakes. He was about to vomit from eating this cake. "I'm afraid I won't want to eat cakes for a year." The stall owner smiled slightly, so he was lucky. He softly comforted, "Hold on, the city gate is about to close. If no one is there by then, we will go back." These people have all seen the portraits of the 5 people who escaped from Lysa's city, as well as Sandike's portrait. Even if they enter the city disguised, dozens of pairs of eyes around them cannot miss them all. As long as they dare to enter the city, they have the confidence to recognize them. And the time to close the city gate is almost here. At this time, residents who go out of the city to work will come back, and the number of people entering the city is also the largest. The two chatted idly. The old beggar's eyes suddenly froze, instantly locked on a pair of men and women in the direction of the city gate. These 2 people were dressed as ordinary residents, but he still recognized them as the target this time. He was happy in his heart, but he didn't show any strangeness on his face. Standing up, the wooden stick in his hand tapped on the stone wall next to him, as if he wanted to knock off the dirt on it. And with these few taps, countless eyes swept towards the city gate. With the beggars tapping, the bustling North City Gate seemed to quiet down for 2 seconds before the noise returned. The sounds of hawking and begging were endless. These subtle changes didn't attract the attention of others. At the city gate, people entering the city pushed and crowded. The guards on duty maintained order, cursing and shouting. The 5 people, scattered among the residents, entered the city one after another. Under the gaze of countless eyes, the 5 gathered in front of a nearby stall. The owner was a scruffy middle-aged man who glanced at the 5 and nodded slightly. "Everyone's here, right?" The 5 people who entered the city one after another all knew each other. They looked at each other and nodded. The middle-aged stall owner glanced around and continued, "Something's not right today. There are so many vendors in North City all of a sudden. Let's take a longer route." He had a feeling that there were many new faces at the North City Gate today. He didn't know if it was related to his mission, but he felt something was unusual. He rolled up the vegetables on his mat, carried them on his shoulder, and walked into the city. The 5 people followed silently behind him. "Huh." A guard at the city gate yawned boredly. He subconsciously glanced behind him and was slightly taken aback. His companion, seeing him staring behind him, also looked back but found nothing wrong. "What's up?" Looking at some woman. The guard came back to his senses and frowned. Why is it suddenly so deserted? His companion also looked back. It was true. The place that was just lively and crowded was now deserted. The stalls were packed up and the beggars were gone. It suddenly became quiet. Who cares? It's better when it's not so noisy. It's easy for things to happen when there are too many people. That's true. Inside the room, Rebecca, Fang Hao, and all the heroes were waiting silently. Everyone was gathered in the room, but it was deathly quiet. Fang Hao checked the gold watch on his wrist from time to time, calculating the time the city gates would close. Rebecca, beside him, was even more nervous than Fang Hao. Her fingers were tightly clasped, her knuckles white from the effort. If there was no information before the city gates closed, Fang Hao would have to implement his previous plan, kill Grot directly and silence him completely. The room was silent, everyone waiting quietly. After some time, the sound of a guard's inquiry came from outside the door. Soon, there was a knock on the door. "Sir, there's news from the North City Gate." The deathly quiet room seemed to come alive. "Come in." The door opened, and a Lionheart knight dressed as a peddler strode in. After bowing slightly, he said, "Sir, we found the people from the portrait at the North City Gate. There are 5 of them, being led by a person dressed as a peddler towards the city center. Our men are tracking them." Fang Hao immediately stood up. "Let's go. Take me there." "Yes, sir." Fang Hao led his men directly out of the room. In the residential area of North City, inside an inconspicuous civilian house, Sandike held a list and began to verify the identities of the 5 people in front of him. Although he didn't know who these people were or why they were secretly disguised and entering the city, from their demeanor and appearance, they didn't look like ordinary civilians at all, but rather like those noble lords. Coupled with the fact that these 5 people were his employer's guests, his attitude was very humble, and he didn't put on his usual gangster boss act. Cough, cough. Clearing his throat twice, Sandike forced a smile and said, "Sirs, the clothes are ready for you. Change your clothes. There's a carriage outside, and we'll take you to the employer's place shortly." The 5 didn't say much and began to change into the clothes Sandike had prepared. Just as the 5 had finished changing and were about to follow Sandike out, the sound of his subordinates cursing suddenly came from outside. "What are you guys doing? Get lost." Recently, Sandike had suffered heavy losses among his subordinates, so he had recruited a new batch of people. However, these people were far inferior to the former mercenaries. At most, they could only be considered thugs and ruffians. Hearing the cursing outside the door, Sandike stopped. The other 5 also stopped cautiously. Immediately after, there were a few sounds of thud, thud from outside. Sandike's face changed. He was too familiar with this sound. It was the sound of swords entering flesh. He knew something had happened, and the other party was determined to kill them. Otherwise, who would dare to kill people in Silverwing City? Creak. He had just drawn the dagger from his waist when the door was pushed open. Several figures filed in, dragging the fallen bodies with them. These people were dressed differently. Some were street vendors, while others were disheveled like beggars. However, Sandike scanned the people in front of him one by one and found that he didn't recognize any of them. He could also be sure that these people were not his enemies. "Brothers, is there some misunderstanding here? I understand the rules. I'll give you the money, just spare our lives," Sandike said, throwing his weapon aside, and dragged a wooden box from under the bed, carefully opening the lid to reveal the glittering gold coins inside. Although it was only a small box, for ordinary people in this city, or even some minor nobles, this was a considerable amount. However, the few people didn't even look at the wooden box. Their eyes remained fixed on the 6 people. "Are you Sandike?" Sandike's heart sank. They were here for him. What do you want with me?" Sandike asked cautiously. "It's you. Just wait." This. The 6 didn't understand, but they could only wait in silence. Soon, footsteps were heard from outside the room. The door opened again, and a young man and woman, dressed as civilians and covering their faces, walked in. "Sir." The people in the room immediately bowed. The young man nodded and took off his scarf, revealing his original face. Thump, thump, thump. Except for Sandike, the other 5 people's faces changed drastically when they saw the young man's face. They instinctively stepped back several steps, and then, with a few thuds, they all knelt on the ground. They immediately pleaded loudly, "Lord City Lord, we were forced to." Don't shout. Be quiet." The people who came in were Fang Hao and Anya in disguise. Although Sandike had arranged ambushes for him many times, he himself had never seen Fang Hao. On the other hand, the other few people, being officials and maids of Lysis City, recognized Fang Hao at a glance. They knew what they were here for, and naturally, they could guess why Fang Hao had appeared here with his men. Sandike, however, frowned. City Lord? These 5 people called the young man in front of them the City Lord, such a young City Lord. Recently, city lords from various cities had come to Silverwing City to attend the Federal Assembly. Which city's City Lord was this? When the 5 closed their mouths and knelt aside with terrified faces, Fang Hao's gaze first fell on the frowning and pensive Sandike. My name is Fang Hao. I came with the Lysis City team. You should know me, right? Sandike's pupils constricted rapidly, and he unconsciously swallowed his saliva. It was him. And no, I don't know you. Sir, do you know me? Sandike tried his best to appear confused, but his acting was too clumsy and looked very fake. Grot had you ambush me so many times. How could you not know me? Fang Hao sat down on a wooden chair nearby. Sandike's face was solemn, but only then did he know that his employer was named Grot. Before, it was always an old man who contacted them, gave them missions, and paid them generously. Seeing that the young man in front of him knew everything, even more than he did, pretending was no longer necessary. He immediately knelt down as well and hurriedly said, Sir, spare my life. I won't dare to do it again, never again. Fang Hao smiled and continued to ask, Where did Grot ask you to take these people? Sandike immediately replied, Sir, I don't know if the person who gave us the mission was Grot, but this mission was to take these 5 people to Manor number 36 in the Central District. You haven't met Grot? And no, it was always an old man who delivered the messages, Sandike immediately replied. Fang Hao nodded. This Grot was not stupid either. If he hadn't received the news about Grot from the Life-Taker's stronghold, he probably wouldn't have been able to confirm that it was Grot who attacked him even if he had captured Sandike at this time. After thinking for a moment, Fang Hao continued to ask, What mission did that old man give you? Just to pick up these people and take them to the corresponding place. There was nothing else. Sandike was very cooperative. Whatever Fang Hao asked, he thought for a moment and answered honestly. The main reason was that besides the mission given to Sandike, there was really no other information. After asking Sandike, Fang Hao's gaze returned to the other 5 people. Among these 5, the one he was most familiar with was the woman, who was less than 20 years old and had been Rebecca's maid. Several times when he teleported, she was waiting in the hall to take him to see Rebecca. He just didn't expect that she would eventually become a traitor to Lysis City and appear here as a witness for the accusation. What's going on? Fang Hao looked at the pale-faced maid. Hearing Fang Hao's question, the maid burst into tears with a wah sound. Fang Hao, afraid that the sound would be too loud, had someone cover her mouth directly and pulled her aside to question her later. His gaze fell on the remaining few people. He said softly, It must have been hard on the way. The remaining 4 people didn't answer. One of the middle-aged men glanced at Fang Hao slightly and said, Ask whatever you want. We'll tell you everything. We just hope you don't kill us. This person was the Minister of Internal Affairs, a very important official in Lysis City, and he also knew more secrets about Lysis City. Just now, Fang Hao had already mentioned Grot's name, which meant that he was already very clear about the situation on their side, and he also knew the secret of the 5 of them coming to Silverwing City in secret. It was meaningless to continue being stubborn. It was better to exchange for a chance to live. The Minister of Internal Affairs had a good idea, but Fang Hao really had nothing to ask. He only needed to ensure that these people would not appear at the assembly tomorrow, which would already be considered completing the mission. After thinking for a moment, he still said, What benefits did Grot promise you? The other 4 people immediately started crying softly, talking about how Grot had forced them and how they had to betray Lysis City and come here. Of course, Fang Hao didn't believe a word of these words. These people were all old foxes. If they didn't want to come, who could force them? It was nothing more than being promised better benefits than Lysis City that they were willing to come. He waved his hand to interrupt their crying and looked at the maid behind them. Compared to these old guys, Fang Hao was a little surprised by this maid. When Fang Hao saw her, she was a very simple girl with a beautiful smile. He didn't know why she would come here. Stacy, why? Tell me about it. Fang Hao looked at the maid again. When Fang Hao said the name Stacy, Rebecca didn't believe it, saying that Stacy was bought by Rebecca when she was very young and had always been obedient and well-behaved, so it was impossible for her to betray her. But apparently, Rebecca was wrong. Stacy's appearance here represented the truth. The maid was pale and bit her lip in silence for a long time before speaking about her reasons. She was from a commoner background, so she naturally had no right to come into contact with someone like Grot. The last time Hubert and Grot went to Lysa's city, when they stayed in the city, she accidentally broke one of Hubert's items and was asked to compensate him. At this time, Grot spoke for her and paid a high compensation fee. Stacy was very grateful to Grot. Coupled with Grot's old tricks for dealing with women, he had a relationship with her. After that, Grot came to her to identify Rebecca. He promised to support her and make her a noble, and also used his identity to pressure her. Finally, he convinced her, and not long after Rebecca left, she followed the Minister of Internal Affairs here. The development of the story was like a cliché soap opera. Stacy is sorry, madam, sorry, madam. The maids around Rebecca also had a certain level of education. After calming down, they knew that Grot was using her, and it was hard to say whether she would survive afterwards. But at that point, she had already gone this far, and there was no turning back. For an old noble like Grot, it was simply too easy to deceive a young girl under 20. Paying Hubert a high compensation for the item was nothing more than a play they put on together. In the end, she ended up getting involved. But in this era, there was really nothing a servant could do about such things. A noble who wanted to kill you might not even bother to find a reason. After hearing the reason, Fang Hao glanced at the watch on his wrist. It was 10:20 p.m. He gave a look to the Lionheart Knights beside him. Everyone understood the meaning. Thud, thud. Their mouths were covered, and blades slit their throats. Stacy was so frightened that she fell to the ground, wanting to scream but not daring to make a sound. She hugged her head with her arms, trembling with fear. Stacy would be taken to Rebecca, and how to deal with her was not his concern. The others, in their whimpering struggles, gradually lost strength and stopped struggling. The strong smell of blood filled the room. Fang Hao casually put the box of gold coins into his storage space and said, "Bury the people in the room. Be careful not to let anyone see your faces when you leave." "Yes, sir." Everyone began to dig in the room. Meanwhile, Fang Hao, along with Anya and the somewhat limp maid, walked out of the civilian area. At 11 p.m., in the core area of Silver Wing City, which was a famous noble district, properties were not something you could buy with just money. If you wanted to live here, besides the astronomical price of houses, you also needed a certain status. In a manner, in the luxuriously decorated hall, the floor was covered with a luxurious carpet, and a magnificent, huge glowing stone chandelier illuminated the room brightly. In the center of the room, there was an oversized table with a wine glass containing a small piece of an unknown object. Grot sat quietly at the table, sipping his wine slowly while his gaze was fixed on the woman in the center, standing barefoot on the luxurious carpet. The woman had long black hair and was wearing a white sheer veil. She danced barefoot on the carpet. The hidden areas under the veil were revealed with her movements, and every move was extremely seductive, constantly stirring men's desires. Grot swirled his wine glass, his eyes fixed on the woman in front of him, his look of desire undisguised. He took a large gulp of wine. "Take it off." Grot was in a very good mood today. His plan was progressing very smoothly. An hour ago, the butler had sent word. He said the hired mercenaries had already picked up the people entering the city, and after verifying their identities, they would be sent here. Once Rebecca lost her current status, he would naturally have ways to deal with her. The thought of being able to take revenge on Rebecca made his heart burn with excitement. Looking at the woman dancing before him, the desire in his eyes intensified. "Strip," Grot said. The woman was bought by him. The price of transmigrators was not cheap nowadays, especially young and beautiful transmigrators with special skills. The woman dancing on the carpet frowned upon hearing this, but as if she hadn't heard, she continued dancing in silence. Bang! The wine glass was slammed heavily onto the table. "Strip for me." Grot's tone became even heavier. Swish! The woman's slender white arms spread back, and the thin gauze drifted down. Only a tiny bit of fabric remained, maintaining her last bit of dignity. She had been sold here by a slave trader. Naturally, she had also witnessed the cruelty of this world. If she angered these nobles, killing her would have no consequences. Therefore, before the man grew truly angry, she did not dare to disobey in any way. Dignity, that was something to be considered only after surviving. Haha, good, excellent indeed. Seeing the woman obey, revealing a large expanse of skin as delicate as snow. It satisfied Groat's desire for control. He drained his wine in one gulp and chewed the gamey jerky before swallowing it. He rose, walked around the table, and headed toward the woman. The woman instinctively wanted to retreat, but she stopped herself. There was no escaping. Just as Groat was about to pounce, rapid footsteps suddenly came from outside the door. Groat's face showed a look of displeasure. He hated people who interrupted him at critical moments the most. "Master, something has happened," the butler's voice came from outside. The butler was Groat's confidant. He handled all the shady dealings. If he said something had happened, then something truly important must have occurred. Groat sat back down in his chair. "Come in." The door opened, and the old butler walked in. "Speak, what has happened now?" The old butler didn't speak, but glanced at the dancing woman. Groat frowned slightly. He waved his hand at the woman. "You leave first." "Yes." The woman nodded, picked up the gauze from the floor, and ran out the door. Once the woman's figure vanished and the footsteps could no longer be heard, the old butler finally spoke. "Master, the people weren't delivered, and we've lost contact with Sandek. I'm afraid." "What did you say?" Groat roared. We've lost contact. I've already arranged for people to search the commoner district, but there's no news yet," the butler said nervously. Bang! The wine glass slammed onto the table once more. Groat's chest heaved with anger. The plans he had just made to humiliate Rebecca at the council and how to torture her afterward. At this moment, they all became exceptionally blurred. "Where are they? I'm asking you, where are the people? Didn't you say there would be no problems? Why can't you get a single thing done?" Groat roared loudly. "Master, it is my failure. I am willing to accept punishment." The butler knelt directly on the floor, head bowed. "You?" Groat's face turned red with rage. This butler of his was very much to his liking. Finding women, coming up with ideas, he could handle everything very appropriately. Furthermore, he was his confidant. But for some reason, when it came to targeting Lysis City, all sorts of errors kept occurring. Groat sat in his chair and remained silent for a while. Then he stood up and said, "Prepare the carriage. We're going to Hubert's." "Yes, master." The butler immediately rose and went out to prepare. The next day, today was the day of the 100 Cities Council. Fang Hao woke up early. With the help of the maids, he put on an intricately embroidered formal suit. He never thought it would take half an hour to put on a single outfit. But he certainly didn't expect that Rebecca's gown would take over an hour to put on. When they came out, while Rebecca was dressed neatly, the maids beside her were covered in sweat. "Did you guys have a fight in the room?" Fang Hao asked curiously. Rebecca gave her habitual eye roll. "What fight? Let's go." The two boarded the carriage. They headed all the way toward the council hall. Along the way, various flags were planted, fluttering in the wind. The local residents were not opposed to this situation. In fact, during these few days every year, the city's economy would see a rapid and significant boost. It could be considered a means of promoting development. Carriages, escorted by their respective teams, hurried forward together. Drawing the curtains, one could see the other carriages. They arrived at the council hall. After a simple inspection, Rebecca took his arm and they entered the council hall. The hall was exceptionally spacious. The floor was covered with a soft wool carpet that spanned the entire hall. The stone pillars of the hall were carved with ornate reliefs, and the walls on both sides were painted with beautiful, colorful illustrations of stories. On a wooden stage set up to one side, musicians played melodious music. Young and beautiful girls sang softly along with the music. The girls' voices were ethereal and pleasant, very beautiful to hear. The seating in the hall was divided into 3 areas. At the very bottom, in the most densely packed area, there were hundreds of seats. Arranged neatly like cinema seats, they all faced forward. The second area was slightly higher, arranged along the left and right sides, numbering nearly 100. The third area was the high platform at the very top. There were only 5 seats, but they faced downward, overlooking all the counselors. Rebecca, arm in arm with Fang Hao, came to the second area and sat down in a spot. She said, "This is the area for the 100 cities counselors. And what about the ones below?" Fang Hao looked toward the bottom, at the cinema-like seating. "Oh, those are the seats for ordinary counselors, like guild representatives, merchant group representatives, and various civil organization representatives. They all sit there," Rebecca explained softly. "Good grief, so quite a lot of people are attending. If there were any terrorist organizations, wouldn't they be able to take out the entire upper echelon of humanity in one go? Not a single one left behind. Then the ones at the top must be the 5 giants you mentioned?" Fang Hao's gaze turned upward again to those 5 lofty positions. The seats and tables were all decorated very ornately. Rebecca lowered her voice and said, "Yes, these 5 people form the upper council of the 100 cities. On the surface, the 100 cities is a democracy where all counselors vote, but the 5 giants have veto power. In reality, whether something can be accomplished depends on what the 5 of them say." "Oh, I see." This setup sounded strangely familiar to Fang Hao. A scaled-down version of the United Nations? Whether a decision could be made mainly depended on the attitude of the 5 giants. If it benefited the 5 giants, it would pass easily. If there was little interest for them, then no matter how much noise was made below, implementing it would be very difficult. This led to cities secretly doing things that violated the 100 cities regulations, with everyone tacitly understanding the situation. Rebecca took out a sheet of paper and placed it in front of Fang Hao. She whispered, "You are taking over the position of City Lord of Lysis City. You'll have to stand up and make a declaration in a bit. Familiarize yourself with it first so you don't get nervous." "Ah, so there's such a thing." Fang Hao looked at the text on the paper. There wasn't much content, just words about loyalty to humanity and such. It wasn't difficult. He read it carefully twice and seriously familiarized himself with it. At this moment, Fang Hao felt eyes on him and looked up. He saw Grote and Hubert walking in together, their eyes glaring toward him with pure hatred. While looking at the content on the paper, Fang Hao reached out and gave them a friendly wave. The two were taken aback. Then, with faces full of anger, they turned away. As time passed, the seats below were gradually filled. It was a noisy scene, with many people chatting about their own affairs. Dong. At that moment, a bell rang. From the very top of the ceiling, 3 massive banners fell down. The music being played nearby suddenly grew louder, changing from soothing to high-pitched and uplifting. Rebecca leaned into Fang Hao's ear and continued her explanation. The middle one is the flag of the Human Federation. The left one is the hero flag representing the Hall of Justice, and the right one is the city flag of Silverwing City. Fang Hao nodded, but his heart was filled with surprise. He felt a sense of familiarity toward the hero flag on the left. It had a blue background but was printed with a bronze, horn-shaped crest pattern. The more he looked, the more familiar it became. Under the table, Fang Hao opened the Lord's book. In the storage space, he checked the Valiant Horn stored within. Valiant Horn, orange crest. Category, crest. Ability, when worn by a human, Warhorn attributes plus 100%. Description, during humanity's dark age, they united, wearing the Valiant Horn, noble conviction, sacred barrier, sharp sting, and just truth, to unite mankind against foreign races and defend humanity's final dignity. The pattern on the flag was the Valiant Horn printed onto it. The crest was a reward he had obtained during a challenge mission. At that time, he vaguely remembered it being mentioned that the crest was lost and held very important significance for the human faction. Rebecca said it was the flag of the Hall of Justice. Could the Hall of Justice have some connection to this crest? Should he ask Rebecca for an introduction to question Doherty, the leader of the Hall of Justice? This thought had barely surfaced before Fang Hao dismissed it. It was better not to take risks. Everything should be based on steady development. It was best if nothing that could cause upheaval happened. He was just thinking this. Clap, clap, clap. A burst of intense applause startled Fang Hao. Looking up, he saw 5 people walking out at the very top. Needless to say, they were the 5 giants of the upper council. Rebecca, acting as the commentator, introduced them again. The middle-aged man leading them is Doherty, the current leader of the Justice Alliance and Olivia's husband. He has a good reputation, though he's a bit old-fashioned. The one behind him in the church robes is Archbishop Milton. The three behind them are extremely powerful city lords of the 100 Cities Federation. Hearing this, Fang Hao also observed the 5 top figures of the human 100 Cities Federation. Doherty looked to be in his 40s, with a burly build and dark skin. He carried a natural air of imposing authority as he walked. He wore a deep purple noble robe with a valiant horn pattern embroidered on the left chest. Walking out beside him was an old man. He was tall and thin, dressed in church robes, and held a scepter in his hand. His face was kind, and he walked out with a smile, occasionally waving to those below. The last 3 were also middle-aged men, dressed in brocade robes with calm expressions. However, when they walked out, they followed behind the first 2. It seemed their power was lower than that of the first 2. The 5 walked to the top and took their respective seats. After a brief opening statement, it was time for the swearing-in of the new city lords and councilors. Those whose names were called stood up and began reading the words from their papers. There were quite a few new appointees this year, but the process went smoothly enough. It was just a matter of reading aloud. However, when it was Fang Hao's turn, a complication arose. After Fang Hao stood straight and finished reading the content on the paper loudly, a voice came from above. "Fang Hao, you're a transmigrator, aren't you?" Fang Hao looked up and saw it was Archbishop Milton, whose gaze was fixed on him. Milton looked like he might be 80 or 90 years old, but his voice didn't sound like it. It sounded more like a middle-aged man's, and it was very resonant. The Archbishop's interruption at this moment made all the counselors present feel that something was wrong. Their gazes all snapped toward Fang Hao. Fang Hao was also bewildered, not understanding why a surprise scene was suddenly added for him. He looked down at Rebecca, asking if this was part of the process. But from Rebecca's eyes, he saw confusion and worry. So he knew this was definitely not part of the process. His gaze fell back on Milton, and he said with a smile, "Yes, I am a transmigrator." The appearance of transmigrators has become the most unstable factor in Silverwing City. It seems Lysis City has handled this aspect better. "You seem to get along quite harmoniously," Milton continued. The upper council possessed absolute power. With Milton saying this, Fang Hao's situation became very dangerous. Whether he could successfully become the city lord depended heavily on Milton's words. Fang Hao thought for a moment and said, "What's unstable are social factors. Attributing it to a specific group is like saying every city has good and bad people. But you can't say a certain city is filled entirely with bad people or entirely with good people. There are indeed bad people among transmigrators, but by comparison, the quality of transmigrators is much higher than that of the natives." Milton's perspective as a native was inherently problematic. Of course, the reason Milton spoke this way was more to make things difficult for Fang Hao than an inability to accept transmigrators. The Russian saint was himself a transmigrator. He had even been given great responsibilities within the church and was competing for the position of archbishop among the 12 saints. "Oh, in that case, do you have the confidence to manage Lysis City well?" Milton's expression remained unchanged, still asking with a smile. He looked exactly like an old fox with a hidden dagger in his smile. "I do." "Haha, good, a young man with ambition. However, I have received a file recording the violations of Federation regulations that have occurred in Lysis City over the past few years. You have just made your declaration. In your opinion, how should this matter be handled?" Archbishop Milton looked at the 2 below with interest. As soon as these words were spoken, the crowd below instantly broke into a noisy chatter. Beside him, Rebecca's face instantly turned deathly pale, without a trace of color. The one presenting the evidence was not Grote, but the Archbishop. By now, all the council members present understood the meaning of the words spoken. The Archbishop had obtained some incriminating evidence regarding Lysias City, which was why he was questioning the newly appointed city lord at this time. Too many people coveted Lysias City, and too many people hoped Rebecca would give up her position. And this time, the Archbishop, one of the 5 greats, personally brought out the evidence. Rebecca couldn't possibly not step down. Perhaps she wouldn't even have the chance to leave the council hall. It seems Rebecca is finished this year. She's held on to Lycia's city for so many years. It's time for her to let go. I heard she killed her previous husband. The upper council definitely won't let her continue to control Lycia's city. What can a woman manage? I wonder which important figure will benefit after she's imprisoned. The council members below were discussing animatedly. The archbishop had a certain degree of confidence in bringing out the evidence. Everyone realized that Rebecca was about to be finished. Everyone was waiting for the follow-up with a sense of schadenfreude, while also looking for an opportunity to step on Rebecca and show their faces in front of the archbishop. Looking at the archbishop above, Fang Hao immediately understood why he hadn't found the compiled evidence. Last night, he had sent Luo Li to Grot's residence and Hubert's residence. He hadn't found the evidence in either place. It turned out it had already been sent to the archbishop. However, he had killed all the witnesses. What use was there in him producing evidence that couldn't be verified? Was there a backup plan? Or did the archbishop not know that the witnesses were dead? He quietly glanced at Grot in his seat below. He saw sweat beading on Grot's forehead, his eyes constantly shifting as if he was thinking about something. Seeing this scene, Fang Hao was also certain. Grot had only handed the documents to the archbishop. And the people who could testify had all been killed by Fang Hao last night, which the archbishop was still unaware of. This meant that what they possessed was only written evidence, which lacked persuasiveness. After thinking about this, Fang Hao's face still wore a smile. He said, "Archbishop, I'm not quite sure what you mean. You may not understand, but Rebecca should understand what I mean. In the past 3 years, Lycia City has illegally sold weapons and equipment to the Beastmen, and the city's funds have been unaccounted for. I heard that in order to satisfy your vanity, you even spent huge amounts of tax money to design clothes specifically for yourself. Rebecca, do you have anything to say?" The archbishop slammed his hand on the table. Everyone knew that the rules of the 100 cities had been revised too long ago and were no longer applicable to the current situation of each city. Each city also developed in its own way, and everyone turned a blind eye. And now, it seemed the archbishop wasn't planning to let Rebecca off the hook. Everyone in the lower council was observing the situation, while the 5 people in the upper council seats remained calm. It seemed they all knew about this matter long ago. Thinking about it, it made sense. Rebecca had been informed by Olivia and had prepared in advance. Rebecca stood up, her expression still calm, and spoke softly. "There is nothing to say. These are all fabrications by some people. I am not aware of them." Rebecca herself was strong-willed. She had been openly and secretly fighting with these nobles for decades. Not to mention that Fang Hao had dealt with the witnesses. Even if he hadn't, she couldn't show weakness at this point. "Rebecca, think carefully. If you admit it, then there is still a way out of this matter. If you remain stubborn, you should know the consequences," the archbishop said angrily. Rebecca's expression remained unchanged. "How can I admit to something that didn't happen?" At this moment, Dalty, the leader of the Hall of Justice, also spoke. "Rebecca, are you sure you didn't do it?" According to Rebecca, Dalty was a righteous but stubborn person. Even if Rebecca and Olivia had a good relationship, he would not speak up for Rebecca. Therefore, there absolutely could not be any witnesses from Lycia City present. "No. If you have evidence, you can present it." Rebecca still didn't back down a single step. Dalty stopped speaking, while the archbishop beside him wore a mocking expression. His gaze fell on a spot in the lower council seats, which was Grot's position. "Grot, bring in the witnesses." Grot wiped the sweat from his face. He motioned towards the entrance. Indeed, several guards entered from the doorway, bringing in 2 humans. Rebecca had been a little nervous just now, but when she saw the appearance of the entering witnesses, her expression instantly calmed down again. Grot stood up, forcing himself to remain calm, and said, "Everyone, these 2 can testify to Rebecca's crimes. They have handled the weapons and equipment sold by Lycia City." Everyone looked at Rebecca. But Rebecca showed a smile and said loudly, "Grot, who are these 2? At least you should prepare a suitable identity for them." Grot had no way out at this point. He could only bite the bullet and say, "These 2 were responsible for security and weapon manufacturing in Lycia City, respectively. They can testify to everything that happened in Lycia City." After saying this, everyone looked at Grot in confusion. Even the archbishop in the upper council seat frowned and looked at him. a guard, and a machinery craftsman. Putting aside the authenticity of their identities, did he really think he could overthrow Rebecca by bringing in two such people? Was this a joke? If it were really that easy, Rebecca wouldn't have been in charge of Lycia City for over 20 years. The archbishop didn't know that late last night, Fang Hao had killed all the people Grot had prepared. And with the archbishop's status, Grot wasn't qualified to see him. This delay had brought them to the start of the council meeting. In desperation, Grot had just found two random people to deal with the situation. "All right, take them down," Dalty suddenly said. Anyone with a discerning eye could see what was going on. These two were just brought in temporarily to fill the numbers. As soon as the people were brought up, they were taken down again. And Grot quietly returned to his seat. Sweat soaked his entire body, and he felt as if he were completely drained. Dalty looked at the archbishop and said softly, "Archbishop, I think we should continue with the council. The matter of Lycia City can be discussed after it has been thoroughly investigated." This was a polite way of saying that they shouldn't waste any more time on this matter, as there were many other things to deal with in the council. The archbishop's face became even more serious. He said, "Leader, I will ask one last time. If there is no problem with Lycia City, I will not pursue this matter further, and I will thoroughly investigate the person who provided this information." Dalty glanced at Rebecca below and nodded. The archbishop stood up directly, his gaze falling on Rebecca, and said sternly, "Rebecca, I ask you, are the 72 charges, including the overforging of weapons in Lycia City in the middle of this year and the sale of weapons to the beastmen, true?" As he spoke, a golden light emanated from the archbishop's body. The council members below were all surprised. This was an ability of the church, interrogation. When locked by this skill, and if their strength was inferior to the casters, they would be unable to lie. It was similar to Blackthorn's ability Talk to the Dead. Blackthorn interrogated the dead, who would answer any questions within a short period. An interrogation was a skill that affected living beings, making them unable to lie with a sincere heart. Rebecca still stood in place, and a sense of piety immediately rose in her heart. But this feeling just arose and then quickly disappeared, as if it had been cleared by some energy. She could feel that this power was emanating from her chest. She knew that the featherlight dagger Fang Hao had given her had played a role. But she didn't dare to be careless in the slightest, and immediately showed a pious expression and slowly said, "False. This information is not true." The archbishop was stunned, and Grot was also stunned. The archbishop's rank was too high. In this situation, Rebecca should definitely not be able to lie. Could the information really be false? The archbishop wanted to say something else, but Dalty had already spoken to interrupt him. "Archbishop, let's put this matter aside for now. The council must continue." The council was held once a year, and it was not a place to dwell on such matters. Wasting so much time was already an exception. "All right, let the council continue." The archbishop was a little unwilling, but he couldn't keep pressing the matter. He had no choice but to sit back down in his seat. Rebecca also sat down, gripping Fang Hao's hand tightly. She had been greatly frightened. The pressure the archbishop exuded was not something ordinary people could bear. Rebecca had already done very well. The council continued, and the newly appointed council members and city lords also took their oaths. Next, they discussed and voted on some important decisions selected during the previous small meetings. Fang Hao wasn't interested, so he just sat on the side and listened. His hand was just aching from Rebecca's grip. The morning session of the council ended, and the afternoon session continued until after 5 o'clock. Rebecca and Fang Hao were in the carriage on their way back. As they walked out of the council hall, Fang Hao immediately received a system notification. "Rebecca's loyalty to you has increased by 2 points. Current loyalty is 100. Subordinate Rebecca's loyalty to you has reached 100 points. She will not be affected by any alienation statuses such as counter-espionage or betrayal. 100. Fang Hao's heart instantly filled with joy. This was his first subordinate whose loyalty had reached 100 without signing a slave contract. As expected, his long-term help had not been in vain. True feelings are exchanged for true feelings. Time reveals a person's heart. It was just that Rebecca's face was still a little pale. It seemed she hadn't fully recovered yet. Seeing Fang Hao looking at her, she softly said, I didn't expect it to be the Archbishop. They both thought the enemy was Grot, but they didn't expect the church to be involved as well. Fortunately, they had cleared out the traitors in Lycius City the night before. Otherwise, with the church's methods, once the evidence was presented, the consequences would have been unimaginable. It's all right, it's all over. We'll be going back in the next couple of days. By then, no matter how powerful they are, they won't be able to do anything to us, Fang Hao said, holding her hand and patting it gently to comfort her. Rebecca nodded, reaching into her shirt collar. She took out the featherlight dagger hidden in the seam. The featherlight dagger, as an amulet in the shape of a weapon, although called a dagger, was shorter than a regular dagger and was not designed to be used as a weapon. Of course, it could also kill people, but it didn't match its orange rarity. The skill blessing prevented the wearer from being affected by any negative status effects. Last time, when the Holy Saint Mao Zi caused trouble, he discovered that the church had some skills that could affect people. Afraid of something going wrong, he had given the featherlight to Rebecca. However, the council's checks were strict, so it was difficult to bring it in. Fortunately, Rebecca had ample capital and could hide the entire thing in between. And no one would search a woman in that area, so she was able to bring it into the meeting. Unexpectedly, the featherlight had indeed played a role. This council meeting was not without its gains. In the spring of next year, the Federation would establish multiple trade routes to increase contact between the cities. This would allow goods to flow between every city. Once this was implemented, Fang Hao's goods could be sold in large quantities. Producing 100 items from one material was perfect for him. In terms of military matters, the Federation mentioned two things. One was centralization of power, and the second was strengthening the borders to resist foreign races. In short, the 100 cities still had benefits, and unless absolutely necessary, it was best not to break with humanity. Oh, by the way, why is the flag of the Hall of Justice a horn pattern? Fang Hao suddenly remembered this matter. The flag of the Hall of Justice had the exact same pattern as the emblem he had obtained. There must be some connection between them. Rebecca said softly, "Well, that's a long story." After a moment of thought, she continued to explain, "You should have seen the 100 Cities Council just now. The form of the 5 greats in the Upper Council is based on the council form of the Hall of Justice. The Hall of Justice was initially established by 5 human heroes: Valiant Horn, Noble Faith, Sacred Bulwark, Sharp Thorn, and Just Truth. The leader of the Hall of Justice in our region is Valiant Horn, Dalti." Holy crap! Fang Hao was surprised. This emblem of his indeed had a significant origin. Are you saying that besides our 100 Cities Federation, there are other areas where humans live? Fang Hao suddenly realized. Isn't that obvious? Of course. Besides the other 4 leaders who also control the humans in their respective regions, there are also many humans who exist as independent city-states. Rebecca gave a definite answer. It seemed that this world was much larger than he had imagined. Their regional channel was just a small corner. He was afraid that a world channel and a universe channel would appear in the future. Cough, cough. Fang Hao coughed twice and tentatively said, "I guess the Valiant Horn is lost and not in Dalti's hands." Rebecca nodded. Indeed, Dalti has enough prestige and strength, but the Valiant Horn was lost years ago. Although Dalti manages Silverwing City, he doesn't have the emblem. You mean, just hypothetically, if I found this Valiant Horn, what kind of benefits would there be? You have it. Just hypothetically. Rebecca thought for a moment and replied, "You should receive a very grand reward from the Hall of Justice. After all, it represents significant meaning among humans." What kind of reward? A city, or perhaps a lot of money? I'm not sure. Rebecca shook her head. Can I have Silverwing City? Fang Hao leaned in a little closer. Silverwing City? If you really got Silverwing City, the Archbishop would be watching you constantly. TCH. If I got Silverwing City, and he still wanted to be in the city, I'd kill that old man immediately. Rebecca was startled and quickly covered Fang Hao's mouth. She glared at him with a look of fear. She turned around and urged the carriage to speed up. The carriage jolted. Fang Hao put his arms around Rebecca and said softly, "The council is over. When are we going back?" Rebecca was a little shy, but she didn't resist too much. We'll prepare supplies for the journey in the next couple of days, and then we'll go back. Okay, I need to go out tomorrow to deal with the matters of the underground palace. Don't wander around to avoid anyone who might not give up, Fang Hao instructed gently. He wasn't afraid of Grot, but he was a little worried about the church. Oh, I know. It's so hot. Let go of me. Rebecca twisted her soft body. Fang Hao naturally wouldn't let go. With 100 points of loyalty, it was confirmed that Rebecca wouldn't resist. He said softly, "It's the last day. When we go back, we'll be busy with our own things. I'll come and play chess with you tonight." Rebecca's face turned red as blood, and she naturally understood the meaning of his words. She nodded gently.